When I attended my former university, University of Notre Dame, I was one day sitting in the common area of my dorm's floor watching TV and doing homework. On my right, out of the corner of my eye, I could see people walk by, and on my left, I would see their reflections in the window as they walked by. I was just chilling there for a while, and out of the corner of my left eye, I saw someone walk outside the window towards the direction our gym was. It was surely not a reflection, and the dude was wearing a suit. I didn't think anything of it for a few seconds until I realized, wait a minute, I'm on the third floor. It freaked me out, as I was sure I saw someone, so I promptly went to bed. A couple of weeks later, I was scrolling through my dorm's Facebook page and saw a new article about someone who had passed away the day before their graduation. Apparently, he lived on the same floor as I, and even occupied the room next door to mine. With how many dorms there are on campus, it wasn't a coincidence. I swore it was him I saw. I went back to my hometown theater with a friend who's never been there. They're doing renovations, and while watching our movie, we both saw a silhouetted man in the booth with the projector. But most of the time, there wasn't anything up there. It was fine until the end, where we realized no one had been controlling the camera. It was automatic. After that, we were talking about it while using the bathroom, and I see a black form from the corner of my eye in the stalls. Whenever I looked, though, nothing was there. My friend had left, and noises started coming from the stall end of the public bathroom. I see the blob figure more frequently from the corner of my eye, and I'm drying my hands when I hear it, feel it, walk up to me. It swiped at my coat. I finished up and ran out to tell my friend. In short, it was a good birthday. I was around 6 years old. I was late for music class. You see, my school was a middle school on one half of the building, but a preschool on the other. And for some reason, our preschool music class was at a middle school part of the building, and that means it takes a while for me to get there. Everyone had already went in, and I was going in by myself when suddenly I stopped. On the end of the hallway, I saw a gray naked child with black eyes and black hair. I wasn't scared as a kid. I was just confused. What is it? Is it a ghost? I couldn't understand, and I didn't want to approach it. I just went back from where I came and skipped class. Over the years, I had dreams with him, but I know it's probably just my brain, not a ghost. In my dreams, he would try to scare me or drag me to my basement, though there was this one weird dream where I was doing house chores, and out of nowhere, he walked up to me and just said, "Bridge." And it ended there. I haven't ever seen him again, apart from that, and I kind of want to see him right now. I'm not sure of the existence of ghosts, and I'm split between them being real or fake. The only other weird paranormal story I have is this. I was asleep and dreaming. The dream had a few of my friends talking. Suddenly, one of them jokes about putting me in a demon hole. The word demon echoes heavily in my mind, and I wake up. I don't know how or why, but I sense something standing in my doorway. This wave of fear swallows my whole body, and I don't want to move. I'm too scared to move. I'm panicking in my mind, and I decide to do that thing where you pretend to sleep but lie on your side while sleeping. Immediately after moving, this incredible wave of relief fills my body. I'm no longer afraid. I decide to call my mom for help. There's no way I'm getting up. The light switch is too far away. I try to yell help, but I can't speak for some reason. I try different sounds. Maybe I can say something specific. I try this until a sound escapes my mouth. I scream repeatedly. Nothing. I think to myself, screw it. I run to the switch light. I turn it on and sit down on the floor. It's over. I think that was some type of sleep paralysis, but I've never heard of being scared of something you can't see or hear, or just sense. Nothing else really happened to me after that. My earliest memory I have is from a nightmare I had when I was 4. I had weird dreams, like how one time I dreamt I cried on the floor for days until a group of men shushed me, and then the dream ended. However, this one stuck with me the most. It was one of those long dreams out of a story, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. I was woken up by nightmares in the dreams. It was weird, but essentially I woke up and looked out my window. There was a car, and I saw several people come out of the car. They wore colored masks. I guess they saw me. They ran towards my door. I ran to my mom in the living room and told her not to open the door. She told me I was overreacting and opened the door. She got stabbed, and a guy took her, threw her at me. I bolted and ran back to my door, jumped the fence and ran to a house begging for them to let me in. An old woman opened up the door and let me in. I was happy, and I felt safe. She said she would make me cookies, and I said sure. Then the guys came back and started ripping her apart, so once again I ran. But at that moment I woke up. I didn't want the dream to end, so I tried going back to sleep. It worked, and I was back running. Just running. That was the rest. I was stuck in a black void. All of a sudden, I was in a room with the guys. They were laughing and joking with me. I remember feeling uncomfortable and just laughed with them out of fear. One of them stood up and stabbed me. Then I woke up in a sweat. Not the greatest memory of my past, I guess. Moral of the story: if the dream is weird, don't go back to it. I was about 8 years old when this happened to me. It was 10 p.m. I was playing with my dad in a tiny park near my grandparents' house. We were about to leave until suddenly I heard something from behind some nearby trees. Hello. The voice sounded like a 7-year-old's. Without thinking much of it, I said hello back, until I realized how creepy it was that a kid like me was behind some trees saying hi to random people. I asked my dad if he heard the voice. He denied it. On my way back to my grandparents' house, someone threw a tiny pebble to my head. "Hey, who's there?" I said. Then I heard the voice again. Hello. I asked my dad if he heard it that time. The same answer as before. We kept walking till we finally got to the house. We had to leave because I had school next day. Me and my family got into the car and left. I pulled my head through the window to enjoy the wind on the way home. I was enjoying the wind until my dad stopped at a red light with my head still hanging from the window. I heard the voice one last time. Goodbye. My dad still doesn't believe me when I try to tell him the story. My parents took me hiking once when I was 4 or 5. We found this old-ass cabin that looked like it was 100 years old. They decided to go inside. I came in with them. I looked inside a hole in the floorboard, and I swear on my life I saw eyes looking back at me. They didn't blink. They just stared. I didn't know what to think, so me being the galaxy brain kid that I was, just shut and just didn't say anything about it. I had mostly forgotten until my parents told me that the cabin was burnt down, and no one knows why. I don't know if I saw a dead body, some animal, or an old-ass doll. Whatever it could be still there, under the rubble of the burnt-up cabin. Oh boy, do I have some stories. According to my mom, when I was a wee lad, about 4 years old, I used to suddenly scream and cry in fear in the middle of the night. I told my mom it was because a man was always trying to scare me when I was sleeping. My mom, grandma, and sister have had some weird involvements with spirits. Mama assured that she could see spirits when she was a child. Because of this, she brought me back to my grandma's house and tried to do some spirit channeling, as she suspected that an evil spirit was playing tricks with me for its own enjoyment. Can't remember much about it, but apparently Grandma channeled the spirit and was threatening to curse me and my mom. The next day, I came running to my mom, saying that a weird man was in the doorway. She went to see him and discovered that it was another spirit, a black man with an elongated neck. He told her that he was a slave that got executed by hanging, and that the spirit was tormenting me was, apparently, his slave master. Things are foggy after that, but the information was used by my mom and Granny to make some sort of right to ban the slave master. Suddenly the spirit went away, and I never had any experiences like that ever again. Another thing happened during Easter. Me and my mom went to see my sister and her friend to invite them to go visit Grandma the next day. When we were leaving, my sis said, "Can we please be careful during the trip? I had a dream last night where me, her friend, and you, Mom, were inside a car and we crashed." I don't know why BBG, good old handsome unlucky me, wasn't in it. The next day we picked sis and her friend and we got on the road. During our trip going to Granny and coming back to the city, the car was making some weird noises and my mom thought something was wrong with the tire. We did make it back home safe. The next day, my mom went to see a car repairer to examine our car and find out what's wrong with it, only for him to find nothing wrong at all. She then went to another car repairer that she personally knows and keeps in contact with in case our car has a problem. When she arrived, the repairer just looked at the car and said that something was wrong with one of the tires. It turns out 3 out of the 4 of the tire's bolts were crooked, loosening the tire. That basically meant that the tire should have gone out, making the car crash. Thankfully, he replaced them for free. To make things weirder, my mom said that back at Granny's house she saw a spirit twice. It did nothing. It just was there. Well, this was long as hell, but I feel better being able to tell these misadventures somewhere. If you're reading this, Goose, thanks, but I can't forgive you for insulting our Lord and Savior Garfield. I'm sorry. It's a terrible comic, I'm sorry, but it really is. Thanks for the story, though. It was around 10:30 p.m. at night, and I was half asleep. While I was watching YouTube, my closet door swings out very powerfully, and I freaked the fuck out. Note, I was like 9 years old at the time. I go upstairs to my mom and dad's room, crying and freaking out, and my dad doesn't care, so my mom brings me back into my room and tucks me back into bed. A few years later, I found out my house used to have a family with a very sick relative who stayed in the home. Sad to say that person died about a month before we moved in, and every other person who lived in my house after that had reported to see the same thing in the very same room. So every night I stare at my closet thinking about that traumatic experience I had. I had a dream that people were killing themselves in the street. There was one woman on a sidewalk kneeling on her hands and knees with people surrounding her and cheering. Some guy with no shirt and super long hair came up next to her and said, "Here, this is how you do it," then proceeded to bash his forehead into the sidewalk several times. The scariest true thing that happened to me was when I was 13. Our parents had a small cabin up in the woods. One night when we were staying over, the weather was very cloudy and thunderous. Lightning filled the sky like a movie. Every couple of seconds you'd see the sky fill up with light, so I wanted to check it out because of how badass it was, so I decided to just go outside. It was close to midnight and everyone was asleep, but I felt safe because there was usually enough traffic around you, so you don't really feel like anything was going to happen. I go outside in the front yard and I close the door. I turn around and see a black image right in front of me, and I noticed that it moved and started staring at me. I thought to myself that it must just be my dad for some reason checking out the storm, so I call out to it. "Dad?" I said, and the figure in a deep dark tone said, "No." I choked, but gathered up enough courage to ask, "Who are you?" And he replied, "I'm Frederick." I'll never forget the damn name. I replied in a scared, barely confident tone, "You have to leave." Then what scared me to death, he replied angrily, "This is my house." Scared shitless, I managed to get inside and close the door. I see him stand up. Just like a movie, I tried locking the door. Our cabin was built in the 50s and had a janky lock, so I was shaking to try and lock it and managed to lock it, which felt like took hours, but I was able to do it. I see the figure stand up and go to the side yard. I woke my parents, telling that I saw a man walk around outside, and repeatedly told them that I wasn't sleepwalking because at the time I tended to sleepwalk. But they got up and my dad went to the other side of the house to get a defense weapon, which comedically was a walking stick. He sees a small light coming from the door, inspecting the inside of the house. He turned on all the lights outside and ran out the door. The last thing I remember seeing was an elderly drunk homeless man who apparently was looking for a place to crash. My dad told him to just keep walking down the street just to get him out of there. We called the cops and the cops caught him urinating in the bushes. He got arrested for public urination, but not for attempting to break in. I'm not a great storyteller, but this really happened, and I will never forget his name, Frederick. Okay, Goose, now listen. When I was a kid, I woke up from the top of the bunk bed me and my brother shared, and I saw death at the open closet/hallway, and I climbed so fast down my bed and into my parents' room, which were on the same floor, and I screamed that death was coming for me. Parents would tell me that I was just dreaming the whole thing, but I don't buy that. By the way, as a kid, I always heard a woman person call out my name, and my brother would also hear it, but it was always my name. Cousin, brother, and I were digging in the dirt when we found this smiley face that glowed like burning charcoal, and throwing water at it did not seem to stop it from glowing. I vaguely remember my life passing me by before I became sentient/conscious and aware of myself. That was a weird feeling, not gonna lie. Also might be my first memory. Might as well. This story relates more to a family matter than me specifically, but I'm still involved. When I was little, around 3 to 4, I used to live in Tennessee with my mom and my dad. My dad at the time was on a mission trip with our local church, along with my mom. I was being watched by their friend at the time. When they got back, they had also brought a souvenir, which was a small stone statue. We didn't know at the time, but essentially it was an idol of one of their false gods that they worshipped within the area. A lot of satanic stuff was known to occur there, hence the missions trip. So, when they arrived home, stuff instantly just wasn't right. They refused to tell me the whole story and everything that happened, but here's some minor things before I get to my main and arguably most traumatizing part of the story. Note that these events may not be in chronological order. All of this occurred once my dad, who was training to be a pastor for a Baptist church, left for an unrelated business trip. Lights would constantly flicker on and off, no matter the time of day, and at one point when my mom was driving down the street to arrive home at night, every light within the house was rapidly turning off and on at random. She turned around instantly, not wanting me to be put at risk, seeing as how I was very young. No one was in the house at the time. At one point, there was objects thrown at walls, mainly things on the same shelf as the statue. When we did realize the cause, and after my dad got home, we threw out the statue in the garbage to have it taken away. For the first time since we moved there, the garbage truck never arrived. For about 3 days each night, we'd all sleep in one bed as a family due to loud bangings from outside the house. Once the truck came and took away the garbage, everything stopped. Now for my main experience that I still remember despite me being 4 or 5 years old. I was in my bed looking at the door frame when 3 human-like figures approached me, though they had no human features, being completely black. Think sleep paralysis, except they actually move towards you. And there's 3 figures. After that, I remember screaming and my parents running into my room, right after I screamed. From what they told me, I had a few scratches and was repeatedly saying the cat scratched me through tears, despite us not owning any pets at the time. My dad told me he knew something was wrong before I had even screamed. Simply getting out of bed and running to my room once he started running was when I screamed. This was the same night we threw out the statue. Banging started the next night until the garbage truck eventually arrived as described earlier. I don't really expect many to believe this since a lot is based in religious things such as spiritual warfare, but from the way my parents act when discussing the situation, I can say with 100% certainty that at the very least, something did happen. Though all I remember is the whole shadow event and crying about cats. I'm also pretty sure that it's what sparked my fear of cats, though that's more of a joke if anything. Anywho, that's my story. I'm gonna go enjoy some minty tacos now. Not kidding, I have tacos sitting on a plate next to me. Hey, minty taco shirt coming soon. Hopefully, I guess. I posted this on Tumblr, but I'll repost it here. Up until my younger sister was born, I had frequent nightmares, night terrors / sleep paralysis. I don't know. It was probably because once she was born, I couldn't sleep much. LOL. I remember a few, but this one scared me the most. I woke up in the middle of the night, but I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I looked towards the corner of my room near my closet. My heart kept pounding to the point that I swear I heard it. In that corner stood 2 women, naked and covered in blood. Their hair covered their faces, but I knew they were staring at me. One moved over and opened her mouth, and the next thing I knew, I was running to my parents' bed, begging them to wake up. My mom remembers this and swears she'd never seen me so terrified. It's funny, because I can remember everything about my room. The sheets had Winnie the Pooh on them. I had an Ariel nightgown, and we painted my room blue to look like it was underwater. I was obsessed with the Little Mermaid. I remember my room was messy because I hadn't cleaned it. I remember the Tinkerbell poster on my wall, the flower-shaped lamp on my desk, my orange teddy bear laying next to me. I even remember the 2 women, but I can't remember what their faces looked like or what the other woman did. This memory / dream has always haunted me, and I still don't know why I had it. This isn't my story, but my friend's. It was his sophomore year of college, and he was friends with a girl who was known to be a little controlling. One day, this girl, who I'll call Jane, and another friend, I'll call her Claire, were hanging out in Jane's dorm. After a while, Claire's boyfriend showed up, and she told Jane she had to leave. Jane started flipping out, saying that Claire cared about her new boyfriend and her friend, and that if she leaves, she'll never forgive her. Claire was picking up on some mega weird vibes, so she stood by her excuse and started heading for the door. It was at that point that Jane said, "If you leave, I'll kill you," and pulled out a knife. Naturally, Claire started freaking out and tried to get her to put the weapon down. Jane just kept shaking her head and saying that she knows where Claire lives. She knows where my friend, who told me the story, lives, and that she'll kill them both. Claire was desperate to leave now and told Jane that she would bring her boyfriend back up to hang out with them. Jane made her promise that she'd come back, and after giving her word, Claire dipped out of the building as fast as possible and didn't look back. When campus officials came to check in on the girl, she was supposedly laying in the center of a pentagram and thrashing wildly. Several restraining orders were issued. Here's a story. I used to work weekend nights, and my wife would always be home alone with her car in the driveway. One particular Saturday, I was at work, and my wife happened to go out with her friends. Her friend picked her up, so her car was still in the driveway. When I got home at 1 a.m., the power to the house was out. I went to check the circuit breaker and saw that the padlock on it had been cut. I promptly went inside and called 911. Here's the conclusion I've come to, though I'm open to alternatives. Someone had been watching us for a while and knew our habits. That Saturday, they saw her car in the driveway and my car gone. They cut the lock and threw the circuit breaker. This would have baited her outside. She would have been outside with the front door unlocked and quite vulnerable. I bought a nice bottle of wine for her friend and a shotgun for the house. One of my earliest nightmares is that I was in my home, being forced to watch a video of a dirty crack house almost room and awaiting for something. I don't know who forced me, but I was there, unable to stop watching, and I was hearing screams of horror and pain coming out of the other rooms. I was afraid of what was going to happen to me, and scared to think what was going on in the other room. When I was in 9th grade, there was this girl that would see when I went back to pick my sister up from the bus stop. I spoke to her once, and ever since I can't seem to get rid of her. She always seems to know where I am and when. Like I'll be minding my business, and she'll be in the back, obscured, but watching. I've even moved neighborhoods, and I've seen her there too. I need help. Thanks for reading, by the way. Love your vids. Thanks. I have a million personal scary stories, but this one is a doozy. So, this was a couple years back, right? I was in like freshman year of high school, so I was a wee lass, kind of. On this night, my stepdad left to go to work at 9 as usual. We heard him exit the door and everything from upstairs where me, my mom, and my brother were watching TV. A few minutes pass and eventually it gets to commercial break, so I decided to run downstairs and get some snacks before the show comes back on. When you first go downstairs, you overlook a hallway and you have to make a turn to get into the kitchen, so I was going about doing my business, and as I'm standing in the middle of the hallway, I hear a rustling in the kitchen. Obviously, I'm freaked out. I don't know what to do, though after a good minute, I eventually decide to be a tough guy and choose fight over flight. "Who's there?" I say in my lowest, toughest voice. I don't get a response. Only heavy footsteps. My heart jumps out of my chest. I thought I was gonna die. I hastily but clumsily ran up to the stairs on all fours and entered the TV room before shutting the door. My mom joked about my behavior. Not paying any mind, I go up to her and whisper, "Someone's in the house." My voice trembling, she shrugs it off, suggesting that it was her dog. Oh, it was probably Mandy. But then she looks down to see the layering in front of the couch. I had never seen such a look of horror in her eyes. She tells me and my brother to stay put as she scopes things out. I tell him to follow me into my room, which was the next room over. I grab my knife from behind my dresser and we wait. It felt like ages until we heard our mom laughing downstairs. I sneakily check from the top of the stairs to hear her and her stepdad chatting. Apparently he came back inside without any of us hearing. Sneaky bastard. My story is short, so prepare yourself for a short and probably boring and all over the place story. I was young when this happened, around 7 or 9 years old, and I really hate the dark and or being closed up in dark rooms. I'm a bit of a claustrophobic. I was so used to having my TV on as a nightlight because every time I sat in the dark for too long, I would start to hallucinate and see scary stuff that no one else saw, like shadow figures and big spots of black, etc. But I never saw shadow figures in a human form. It was a school night when it happened. I'd been up past midnight and laughing loud in my room, and I ended up staying up until my dad went to work, but before he left, he came in my room to scold me, telling me to go to bed. Hand on my light switch, about to turn it off. I told him I was afraid of the dark, and he said, "As big as you are, you shouldn't be scared of anything." Me being chubby, I took slight offense to that. But instead of listening to me, he did it anyway. And to make it worse, he closed my door. When he did that, I instantly felt uneasy, and my breathing started to increase. This story happened in Mexico while I was visiting some family. They had a separate small house for guests to stay in. The house was old and made out of concrete blocks, with one large window located at the front of the house and a small one in the bathroom. The house had 3 rooms. The main room was a kitchen, and then the bathroom behind it. Then there was the bedroom. There were no windows in it and only one door that locks when closed. There was also 2 beds separated by a wall, as well as a closet on the other side of the wall that had a sliding door. The house was owned by my deceased uncle. Some of his things were still in it, like pictures and cologne, stuff like that. It was like he was still staying there. I was traveling with my older brother and his wife. He chose the bed in front of the room, and I chose the bed behind the wall, separating the room. While we were settling in, my sister-in-law decided to put on some of her clothing in some drawers. At the time, we didn't think much of it. Later that day, we decided to nap for a little bit, and I think when we woke up, the door was closed. Like I said before, the door, when closed, locks by itself. Well, the door was closed and we couldn't get out. Since the room was made out of concrete blocks, there were barely any cell service. My sister-in-law was trying to look for a key, and I thought I'd help to look too. When I reached for a drawer, I had the intense feeling of stop, like something had told me not to do something without hearing the actual words. I didn't say anything about it if I kept it to myself, mostly because I didn't want to be teased. Long story short, my little cousin, she's like 5 or 6, went through the small window to get us out. The front door was also locked. We all just thought that the breeze just closed the door or something like that. When this was happening, everyone felt an unsettling feeling. This feeling was the first warning that would escalate to something worse. There was times where I couldn't be with my cousin because they would go drinking or had adult times. I was 15 at the time. When this stuff was happening, I'd go back to the house and play some 3DS games. One night, I was laying in my bed and all of a sudden I felt uncomfortable, like someone was staring at me. And like that, I heard the closet door slide shut. I called for my brother and no one answered. I was too scared to look for myself. I just ignored it and put my earbuds in and continued to play more games, but underneath it all I felt unsettled and uncomfortable. Another night of drinking for my brother and his wife, and I decided I'd stay in the main house instead for fear of what happened last time. I stayed up playing and saw my brother arrive. I continued for about 2 hours later. They came running to the main house. When I saw them, they were absolutely terrified. When they calmed down, they told me what happened. They walked in, got ready for bed, and tried to fall asleep. My brother had an uncomfortable feeling like someone was staring at him in the darkness, so did his wife. They both checked on each other and decided to turn on the light. Both of them were very religious and decided to pray. They prayed in English. First, nothing seemed to happen. The uneasiness stayed. Then, my brother realized that they should pray in Spanish, since they were in Mexico. He started to pray out loud in Spanish, and as he was reciting, the feeling of uneasiness grew stronger and stronger, until the room itself couldn't handle it. The light burst, darkness consumed the room once again, and my brother and his wife sprinted out there, like this is what it wanted to happen. We later discussed the events that led to the light being demised. The moment I first felt the feelings of uneasiness when I reached for the drawer, my sister-in-law putting clothes in drawers that weren't hers to begin with. My brother feeling like someone was watching him as he sleeps when I heard the closet door to the first night when the door shut. That spirit wanted us out and clearly showed us. This story might not be thrilling as others, but it's the best I got. Also, all of these were real things that happened. Hey, no problem, man. I thought that was interesting. I frequently have sleep paralysis and I suffer from nightmare syndrome, so I have pretty much night terrors and stuff. Also, I don't dream in color. My dreams are completely in black and white no matter what happens in them. So just remember that. A lot of times before I head to bed, I always feel like I get pulled by the feet or arms, which jolts me up constantly. I have a very detailed dream journal with sketches and drawings of what I've seen or things I've felt. I like being able to use that stuff for inspiration. I think my scariest experience was when I was a bit younger and I had just actually fallen into a dream. I found myself in a cavern with a heavy smog just floating around. I was walking through this cavern and suddenly felt a presence behind me, or like someone was watching me. Of course, you aren't supposed to ever turn around when you get the feeling of being watched, but me being a wee lad and not being the brightest person, I did just that and was greeted by a massive cliff, and off on the far side of that cavern was this massive unblinking eye looking directly at me. I felt as if it was talking to me without actually moving a mouth. I can't recollect what it said, nor do I think it was in any language I ever knew, but whatever it said gave me quite the spook. Usually when things get bad in dreams, I close my eyes in the dream and repeat something akin to, "You aren't real, I am real," which usually solves it. Instead though, it said that it was real. Now, you don't really often get that reaction from something in your dream, but afterwards my head was filled with the sort of screaming that you know, really bad stuff. I awoke with a start, all sweaty, so I decided to get a drink of water. I have a problem with dark spaces. Even to this day, I'm almost 20. I don't do well in the dark alone. Never know what's beyond your sight, but I digress. I was going to get a drink of water, and washed my face with some cool water in the sink. When I opened the bathroom, I wasn't greeted by normal bathroom in my house. Instead, it was a deep pit of blackness, darker than any shadow. So being me, I instantly felt something was wrong and knew something was going to go wrong. I grabbed the bathroom door and tried to shut it, pulling it closed as hard as I could, almost getting there but failing. In the end, I didn't succeed and tried to run, eventually being held down and dragged into the bathroom by a force stronger than me. I then awoke again on my couch, the place I had actually fallen asleep on. I knew I was awake because I could hear my own voice. If you can't hear yourself talk, you're in your dream. That's how I always know if I'm dreaming or not. That's how I usually figure it out. So I actually went and got a drink and washed my face off because I was pretty scared and don't want to go back to sleep. When I got back to the couch, I put my cover over my head and lay her belly down, resting my face on my folding arms. When something happened I'll never forget. Without ever closing my eyes or feeling like I was asleep, I felt something lift up my back. It pulled me up and up and up, through the house and into a portal. Through that portal, I saw windows passing me, like looking into your memories. I saw old friends, old lovers, lots of sad and happy things. Slowly, the memories got more and more frightening until eventually I kicked whatever was carrying me and it dropped me right back into my body. That's what it felt like, as if my soul was just flung right back into my mortal form. All in one night that happened. A few years ago, me and my friends were out trick-or-treating. I think we were in sophomore year. It was real late into the night and everyone was basically done handing out candy, and the night was dying down. We were heading back to my friend's house to finish off the night, eat candy, and watch some horror movies or something. We saw a house that had all the lights off instead and a bowl full of candy on the porch. The driveway was short. There was a large bush to go to the right of. We started walking up the driveway and around the middle we heard something coming from the same direction of the bush. It sounded like something growling and moaning. My friend went over to the bush to take a look. He thought it was someone ready to scare us and run off. When I looked back at the house, there was a man standing in the doorway. He wasn't doing anything. He was just staring at us. I couldn't make out a lot of his face because the only light was the porch light. He looked old and decrepit though. At first I thought he was annoyed that two teenagers were at his property in the dead of the night. As I said, the driveway was short, so we were pretty close to him. I looked at the man and said, "I'm sorry, my friend thought he lost something in your bush. We'll be going." After I said that, the guy started loudly and incoherently rambling and pointing at the bush. My friend ran over to me, "We gotta go right now," and booked it down the road. I followed soon after him, wanting to get as far away from the situation as possible. Now that I look back on it, it's likely the old guy was just mentally ill, but ever since, my friend never told me what he saw in that bush. We don't talk much anymore, unfortunately, but I've asked a few times. It seems like he wants to keep whatever he saw shut away. Maybe it's just for the best that he does. I used to work at an old Catholic school for a summer job as a janitor. One day my supervisor told me to clean the basement, which was very large and filled with toys, bikes, and old record players. I decided to play some oldies on one of the record players that worked, and the second I walked away I heard children laughing. Not sure if it was from the record or from the basement itself. I shrugged it off and moved a couple of bikes. When I was done with the bikes, I turned around because one of the records ended, but when I did, the record was playing on a loop by itself. I turned off the record player and was going to go back to work, but the moment I turned around, all the bikes were back in the position they were in, and I heard the laughing again, this time more prominent. I bolted it out the door, but when I shut off the lights, the red exit sign glowed, and I swear I saw two little silhouettes of some kids standing in the glow. I lied to my supervisor and said the basement was totally clean. Later on, he told me that the basement was extremely haunted. When I was around 4 years old, I had to be alone at home until my babysitter arrived, because my parents were at the other side of the countryside, visiting my sister in an eating disorder facility. I had to be alone for over 1 or 2 hours. Once I remember hearing a voice that came from inside my house, but I was supposed to be alone, so as a curious little girl, I followed the voice all over my house. The voice seemed to come from my bedroom. I opened the door and I saw a young boy. He started talking to me and kept asking me questions like, how is mom doing? Is she happy with her new husband? Does my sister's name know me? Obviously, I was confused, but he treated me nicely, and since then I always used to play or talk with him until my babysitter arrived. But when my sister got out of the facility, I stopped seeing him at all. I was sad, and I told my mom about him. Obviously, she was confused, yet when I told her the questions he asked me, she looked completely terrified. She was completely pale and almost in tears, so she asked me, how does this boy look like? I told her that he looked exactly like my sister. Then my mother told me that before my dad, she had another husband and got pregnant with twins, but this man was very abusive and he punched her in the belly before she gave birth. My sister was fine, but the other baby, the boy, was pretty bad. He died in the next few days after that, and now I sometimes see the mysterious boy looking at me, smiling, and I am 100% convinced that that mysterious boy is in fact my dead brother. It was Halloween, my 8th grade year. There was a huge Halloween party at the richest kid's house, and everyone was there. The hottest girl in our grade was coming over, so one of my friends, we'll call him Dean, went and hid in the bushes with a clown mask and a chainsaw which he'd removed the chain from. He jumped out and scared her, and she was terrified. Later that night, we decided we wanted to spook the girls a little more, so we all went outside and started walking. We told them that we were going to take them to see something cool, but in actuality, we just wanted to terrify them. As we walked farther and farther from the rich part of town and closer to the not-so-good area of town, even we were getting chills a little bit. We tried to shake the feeling that we were being watched, but we couldn't really seem to get it off our chest. After checking the time, one of my friends realized that he was going way too far and needed to get home soon. He started texting his brother to come home and get him, but then we saw a pair of headlights from the distance. He assumed it was his brother and walked over to the curb when a solid white van with a masked driver pulled up. The back door slid open and a man with a painted face clawed at my friend, and he was unable to pull him in fast enough. They sped off. Terrified, we all dispersed and hid into different bushes and shrubs, honestly pretty selfishly, and proceeded to run home after we felt safe. I had a dream that I was in a nursery home with no doors or windows. Imagine the back rooms, and there was an old woman with a white sleeveless short dress following me around and saying hello repeatedly. When I turned around to walk away, her neck and tongue extended to the length of an arm, and she dug her tongue into my ear. That shocked me so much that I woke up grasping my ear and doing the motion of pulling something out of my ear with my arm. I used to work at a knockoff Chuck E. Cheese with bounce houses and a few arcade games that was really haunted. One day, when I was by myself getting ready to open the place up for the day by flipping the brakes on the bounce houses and slides and stuff, when I was leaving the maintenance room, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a small boy staring from the crack of the break room. When I turned around towards the door, it slammed shut. I slowly went to the door and opened it, and nothing was out of place. I then went to the front desk to get as far away as I could from the break room and to check if I forgot to lock the front door back after I got there. I didn't forget. 5-10 minutes go by, and then I hear another door violently slam shut, but it slammed shut several times. I jumped up and tried to check the party room it came from, but the door was wedged almost shut from the trash can that was supposed to be on the other side of the room. I didn't really know what to do, so I just turned on every light in the building and didn't leave the front desk unless I absolutely had to. I had a nightmare where I was in my house, tied to my bed and being watched over by a tall figure. It whispered, "You're a pretty one," while smiling. Its teeth were white and its smile was long. I tried screaming, but no sound would leave my mouth. My door opened and the creature said, "It's time, my pretty," and I heard a sound of something crying in the darkness beyond my door. It was me. I looked beaten. I was missing one of my arms and an eye, from what I could make out. I was horrified, and the creature grabbed the crying me and started to eat the version of me. The sounds were gruesome, and second me was crying louder. The creature finished and started to cut into my body so deep that it reached the bone, smiling and staring into my eyes while I started to cry. The creature opened its mouth, revealing an infinite amount of razor teeth, and said, "Be happy. Smile. I will make you feel better," and then started to get closer to my face. I woke up though, literally fucking horrified of what the hell I just dreamt of. One night at around 10 or 11 p.m., I was walking home from my friend's house to my own after having spent quite a long time there. Our houses are just a block away, so it didn't seem too bad, even though I'm really iffy about being alone at night. Anyway, once I left his house, I decided to head the opposite direction from his house because the lights on the street were dim and I didn't want to risk anything happening to me, so I went around the corner to get the main street that led to my street. As I was walking down the street, I had a brisk pace just to get home faster. And once I hit this one house with a big fence, a car parked at the other side of the street turned on and sat there for a second. I thought to myself, okay, that's creepy, but it's probably a coincidence, like he's about to leave right now. However, as I walked and kept an eye on him, he immediately made a U-turn onto my side of the street and slowly began to follow me. At this point, I was afraid because he wasn't speeding up. I knew he was waiting for me. I kept walking up until I got behind a larger car so he couldn't see me, and then I turned around and began walking back the way I came in and attempted to seem to like I forgot something and maybe see if he was actually following me. Well, this guy went forward a bit, realized I wasn't there, and then began to reverse so he could see me again. At that point, I fully knew this guy was going to do something to me, so then I turned around again and just booked it back to my house, all the while making sure he didn't follow me. I didn't get a clear look at his face due to it being dark and his headlights were on, but I think he knew that I knew what he was doing, so he didn't pursue me further. When I got home, I called the cops to tell them what happened, but nothing came of it. Still kind of creeps me out to this day. This happened to me about a half a year ago. It was 2 a.m. and I was getting ready to sleep. As I was slowly falling asleep, I heard my brother and father talking as they went up the stairs, which were near enough to my room that I could hear people going up or down the stairs. I thought it was odd that my dad was up this late, but I assumed he was awakened by my brother. Oddly enough, I couldn't understand what they were saying, although I was barely conscious, so as I heard them finish their climb up the stairs, I heard my brother talking to me from the entrance to the bathroom, which had 2 doors, one connected to my room and the other to the main room, and he mostly entered the room that way. He continued talking, yet I couldn't understand what he was saying. At the time, I was just hoping he'd leave me alone so I could sleep. Then I heard him coming closer until he was behind me. My eyes were shut the whole time, so I couldn't see anything. I figured he was just checking if I was asleep, so I planned on turning around and jumping at him, screaming to scare him. But once he felt like he was right behind me and I was ready to pounce, I suddenly got this horrible feeling that the thing behind me wasn't my brother. Then I noticed he stopped talking. Instead, I heard the faint ringing of a bell, which got louder and louder until it felt like the bell was ringing from inside my skull. At this point, I had my eyes open, but I couldn't see anything, since I was on my side and the thing was behind me. I'm kind of iffy on this, but when the bell ringing intensified, I felt something brush up against my ear. When the full horror of the situation hit me, I tried to move and scream for help, but I couldn't even move my lips. save for barely mouthing the word help. But then I realized that I probably was experiencing sleep paralysis, as I've heard stories about it before. Once that dawned on me, the bells stopped ringing and the presence behind me disappeared. I stayed laying there for a few minutes, paralyzed by fear more than anything else, and I got up, scanned my room for anything that seemed off, but everything was completely normal. But I was still terrified. So I went to check on my brother and found him still up and asked if he came to my room recently, to which he replied no. The thing that scared me the most was that in the sleep paralysis stories I've heard, people see something, but I didn't see anything, only heard the bell and the voice.
They're coming. They're coming your way. They'll be here soon. Will you be ready?
Once when I was a kid, 6 or 8, not 100% sure, I was sat in the back of my parents' car looking out the window. We had to stop and wait for a bit. Traffic lights, roadworks, not fully sure. So I was just watching people walk by the car window. We then moved forward slightly until we were stopped by a bus stop. By the bus stop was an old man, completely frozen in time. He looked like he was walking, but he had stopped mid-stride. His face was completely frozen the whole time I watched it, and I must have been staring at him for a solid minute because I was so confused. The car then started to move again, and I stared at him until he was out of my sight. I asked my parents, and they just laughed it off, thinking I was making up stories. But I wasn't. I still don't know what the hell was happening to this day, but it's confused and creeped the hell out of me for a while now. Mine isn't exactly traumatic, but it was pretty scary, especially since it caught me off guard. I was in my room sitting on the floor playing Skyrim, and then as I'm playing, my sister came to me and said if I wanted anything from the ice cream truck. I just ignored her and told her no, and she went outside to get some with my older brother. I was too stuck on the game. My dad is a chef, so keep in mind he has a lot of supplies and stuff. As I was playing, I kept hearing a rummaging noise, and I kept asking who was there. There was no one. Now, my room is very close to the kitchen, and as I was playing, a cleaver flew right at me as I was playing. It missed me, and my door was open as it came through. I screamed and looked at it with surprise, and then I heard the front door open, and it was my brother and sister. They asked why I yelled, and I told them. They were outside buying ice cream the entire time, and my dad wasn't present at the moment. The good news is, they bought me an ice cream anyways, and I ate it. I went back to playing my game. I am a very skeptical person. I mostly don't believe in ghosts or paranormal nonsense. This, however, was one incident I've never been able to explain. When I was younger, I lived with my grandmother and grandfather. I lived with them because of the shit that happened in my life. I won't get into it, it's a long and rather depressing story. Point is, this was when I was around maybe 11 or 12 years old. I haven't always been extremely expressive, and I often think out loud, commenting on things I watch. I only really did it when at home alone, out of fear of being called crazy or other stuff. One day, my grandfather walks into my room to tell me he's going out. I acknowledged, waiting for a few minutes, probably 2 minutes, until I was pretty sure he left. I heard the front door shut and everything. I unplugged my headphones to play the audio of the video I was watching out loud. I was watching a video about, I think, reactions or something, when I made a stupid, really loud and obnoxious comment. I was one of those random equal funny kids, so I would often be incredibly obnoxious like that. When I made that comment, a literal millisecond later, I heard my grandfather clearly yell, "Bet you didn't know I was still here, did ya?" Followed by him doing a quick chuckle. I was frozen on the spot as I had a fear of awkward situations and getting in trouble. He didn't walk into the room for a bit, and I was just sat there for a few seconds. I slowly got up to see if he was there, and to my surprise, he wasn't. But I noticed something even more worrying. The truck wasn't even in the driveway. It was gone. There was no way in that time after I heard him say that unless he ran, which I would have heard as he was a big guy, plus the door would have been open and closed. I was immediately plunged into fear and paranoia, absolutely terrified, so much so that I retrieved a knife from the kitchen and kept it with me the whole time. Eventually he got back, and I felt a lot safer. I don't know if it was my mind playing tricks on me, or maybe just me hearing things that weren't there, but it truly scared me. I've never told my grandfather this story. I don't think I want to. Sure, maybe I could get closure, and maybe somehow he was actually there. But if he told me he wasn't, I don't know if I could handle thinking about who, or even what, mimicked my grandfather that day. I still think about it even to this day. Sometimes it keeps me up at night as I lay there thinking of these terrifying possibilities of what happened. I'm 19 now, and I still don't have an answer, nor do I think I ever will. This one was from Ava, and they have multiple different stories, just so you know. This one is called Strange Woman. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I lived in an old, ran-down, moldy house in the mountains of Virginia. It was used for something a long time ago, like a medical place for soldiers or something like that. My room was on the top front corner of the house, and when I would lay in bed, I could see directly outside of the window across the room, and that window was the only window without curtains or blinds. One night, I had my first ever flu, and I was miserable in bed. It was about 9 p.m., and I was having a terrible time falling asleep. I had been crying a lot, but I felt someone press against my bed. It was right below my feet when I felt this very cold hand rest on my ankle. At first, I thought it was my mom to come in to comfort me again, as she did an hour beforehand. But I opened my eyes, only to see a dark silhouette, outlined by moonlight. Moments after opening my eyes, she spoke softly, "It will be okay." That was the last thing I remembered from that night. I still tell my mom about it, but she's sure it was her that came in, but I know her voice, and that was not her. Music from nowhere. I was sitting at the table eating dinner with my parents, and my mom's talking about how she would hear old classical music play every Wednesday night, and how she's going to file a noise complaint because she believes it was her neighbors. That night was Wednesday, and I had gotten out of bed to go to the bathroom. The bathroom was all the way down the hallway, so that was creepy enough. As I was washing my hands, I heard a soft piano playing, and as I walked out of the bathroom, the rest of the music kicked up. Yep, there it was, the classical music. And it wasn't coming from outside either. I heard it echoing throughout the house. I walked downstairs and I could hear it playing from our dining room, and as I got closer, the music got louder. But when I opened the door, the music stopped. Just like that. I'm more than sure I peed myself in that moment. Mom. I was sleeping in the living room for a week because my room was being repainted. I got up with a glass to get some water, and coincidentally, the faucet had stopped working. So I walked to the upstairs bathroom to get water. But I looked down the long hallway leading to the bathroom and saw a body laying in the fetal position in the front of the door. Weirdly, it looked a lot like my mom, so I walked closer. But when I was about 10 feet away, she started to get up. I dropped my cup and ran back down to the stairs and hid under my sheets. This was right before I found out about my mom's drinking habit, so I convinced myself it was her waking up from a blackout. But it's still so strange how everything had led to that point. Actually, if I were to be honest with you, Ava, I actually had a similar experience. I don't know if it was a dream or not, but I remember seeing my mom lay down on the floor of the kitchen. I'm not really going to go into details why she was there. I don't even know why, to be honest, but she told me, like, oh, it was just because I was hungry and I fell asleep. But I think that was the first time I ever found out that my mom and dad get fucking drunk and sleep on the floor. It's probably not as traumatic as what you described, but I remember that happening to me, so I can kind of relate. One time, my cat sat on my bed in the dark, but my mom was shooing the cat out of her room and I saw it walk across the hallway away from me. The cat's shadow was illuminated by a nightlight in the hall. The thing that sat up on my bed hopped off my lap and walked away. I only have one cat and no other pets. This is probably really short. When I was like 9 or 8, I was in bed, sleeping, until I woke up and looked out my window. No, I'm on the top story of our house and my bed was right next to a window. And I saw this like cat creature thing. It looked really weird with like misshapen eyes and a weird nose. When I blinked, it was gone. Could be my imagination, but it still sends chills down my spine whenever I remind myself of it. I was at a party a few years ago. The house where it was had a fairly large backyard with a trampoline close to the end of the fence, pretty far away from the back door, and there really weren't any people outside. The house was pretty crowded and the party pretty insane. Not really knowing many people there and feeling a little overwhelmed from the loud noise, I went outside and I noticed the figure of a person laying alone on the trampoline, looking up at the night sky. I sat down and I started talking to her, and she started talking to me about a whole lot of crazy deep stuff, pointing out the constellations and talking about how the universe is infinite, how there are countless stars in the universe and how small the earth is, and how insignificant a single human life is, how short our lives are, and stuff like that, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff I can't remember. Her voice was hypnotic almost. I don't really know how to explain it fully, but it was like no other voice I'd ever heard before. Like I was entranced by her voice. I could have stayed there forever listening to it. It was amazing. She paused after a while and I sat up and looked around and she wasn't there. She had disappeared. I never really got a good look at what she looked like really. In the dark, I could only make out the outline of her body from the corner of my eyes as I stared up at the stars. Was she even there? I think about it a lot. It was probably the weirdest experience I've ever had. When I was really young, I would sleep in my living room, due to the fact that my own bedroom was really hot during the summer and had no air conditioning. I slept on a futon that faced a big window to our front yard. I recall seeing shadows and watching people walk by on the sidewalk, which gave me a lot of paranoia in a quiet and dark living room all alone. But every so often, I remember seeing a man stop in front of our house. If I had to estimate, it was around 9 or 10 at night. He would walk, stop, and look in, as if he saw me, and stare for another minute before walking away. I remember telling my parents often, only to be told that it's because I watched the show about paranormal experiences. It was my first time being exposed to any horror/true stories based shows, so the thoughts lingered with me at night. But I know that I saw this man. I don't know when it stopped, but I always told my parents. They did eventually question what I was seeing at night. There was no feeling worse than seeing that as a child. When I was about 9 years old, I had a friend over to my house to hang out. We were walking around the yard at the edge of the property. I stood on the fence to get a bit higher up and watched the horses in our neighbor's yard. I could see my friend in the corner of my eye on the fence next to me when it felt like someone punched or hit me in the back. I was obviously startled and looked around my feet for a ball or something that had been thrown at me, but nothing. My friend denies touching me at all, and I never even saw him move from the corner of my eye. Freaks me out to think about it, and even now I have no idea what it could have been that knocked the wind out of me. To preface, my sister, who's 14 years older than I am, likes to call me Babe since I'm the youngest in my family. Around 2 years ago, I was home alone eating dinner while everyone was at work, since their shifts ran late. Nothing was out of the ordinary until a crystal clear voice whispered to me, saying, "Hey babe." It was my sister. I was about to respond, but realized nobody was home. It didn't say anything after that, I've never heard it since. I later asked everyone if they were playing a prank on me by hiding a tape recorder somewhere or something, but nobody confessed to it. I'm sure I was just hallucinating since the whispering was so inexplicably loud and understandable, like it was in my head, but I still sat there for like 10 minutes, not knowing what to do anyway. I know I'm late, but this is a story of when I was left home alone for a week in 7th grade. Little me, sleep-deprived and paranoid, decided to spend the week on an air mattress in the living room to keep a closer watch on the house while my brother stayed in his room. We lived in an apartment, and I had been watching some scary things that night, so it didn't really help my current state. I was on a sectioned off part of the living area, separated by a big curtain pinned on the ceiling. I could see right below the curtain, as it was just a few inches short of touching the ground. I sat on the air mattress before I heard footsteps. It was midnight, and soon after I heard them, I saw feet beneath the curtain walking past. At first, I assumed it was my brother getting some water, so I called out for him and got up. The weird thing was, the feet were headed toward the back door near my dining table, and not back towards the bedroom. So when I crawled out and saw nothing, I was terrified. I got out within seconds, so my brother couldn't have went back to his room that quickly. This easily could have been a hallucination since I was sleep deprived, but I thought it was pretty scary, so I hope you like my story. It stuck with me for years. Once when I was a kid, I had a dream. I was just sleeping when I saw this big chess match. Black was about to win when white came back and brutally destroyed black. I remember all the black players screaming and screaming. They were moaning in pain and agony, knowing they had lost and supposed awful consequences that came with it. When I woke up, I called out, but I kept hearing the screams coming from my own mouth. I called out for hours for my mom, and she finally got up. When I saw her, she talked in a screaming voice too. I told her it was nothing, and I stayed in my bed, calling out for the rest of the night. I have had this chess dreams 3 times, but I could never explain what happened to my mom. Back when I was in middle school, I was staying at my grandpa's house, which I used to stay a lot when I was little. The room I was staying in had a window which diagonally looked into the window of my friend's house. The houses were back to back and the windows were around 2 meters apart. I woke up randomly that night and realized the curtains were open. I used to close the curtains before I sleep because I had a fear of aliens and ghosts, etc. watching me. Before I closed the curtains, I realized my friend was looking at me through the window with pitch black eyes. I stepped back in pure panic and checked if I saw what I saw correctly. He was still there. The fact that he was still staring at me or my window in the middle of the night was weird enough, but his eyes were what creeped me out. I woke my grandma up and asked her to close the curtains. Then I asked her if she saw him too, but she said she didn't look at the window. The next day, I asked him about this, but he said he didn't remember any of it. But he said that he sometimes sleepwalks. It was a comforting answer, but it never explained his black-ass eyeballs unless my reality was fuzzy that night. Okay, so I have always been afraid of pipes, like shower drains and the sort. I always imagined there being a creature small enough to go through those drains and yet powerful enough to harm me. I know this is a stupid fear, especially to someone who has graduated 8th grade. For a while it was a backseat fear and never really had any effect on my day-to-day life. Then I read that one story by Junji Ito about a creepy stalker twisting himself into the pipes of a girl's house. I don't know the rest of the story because I stopped reading to go to bed. Poor choice. I basically never have dreams, let alone nightmares, so they always surprise me when I do. They look and feel so real that I can't separate them from reality in my mind. With all that said, here's that nightmare. I was apparently walking home from a midnight shift from a 7-Eleven in a place in town between the city side and the rural side, with all those 2-story buildings and that jazz, when I saw a crowd gathered around a collapsed building. The place was hazy with smoke and debris. The collapse had apparently been caused by an earth fissure. I pushed my way through the crowd to see, deep in the fissure, a busted pipe, and spilling out of that pipe, a long creature with the body structure that of a wet spaghetti and a color of exposed muscle tissue with splotches of light red and bright white. The creature had a face too, a face staring, of all the people in the crowd, directly at me. Its eyes looked like long olive leaves, and it had a mouth of jagged, extremely long rectangular teeth. I then tried the best I could to run from the fissure, but I went nowhere, like I was running on ice. I then was in my bathroom, cleaning up for the night, and I hear a wet splat come from my room. I instantly woke up after that and completely believed that it had really happened. Again, I have a hard time telling the difference from dream and reality until I think on it. I'm sorry that this was long, but it was the only story I could think of. Have sweet dreams. This story still confuses me to this day. So when I was little, about 10 years old, I had a dream one night that I was in the breezeway of my school. I was walking through it when I felt like someone was staring at me. When I turned around, there was a man standing at the edge of the other side of the street, next to this pair of apartment buildings adjacent to the school. He saw me looking at him and immediately locked eyes with me. He started to move forward and I started to move away, but I was frozen in place. As he reached the bars that separated the breezeway from the courtyard, his eyes began to glow red, and by the end of the dream, that was all I could see. Well, when I went to school the next day, I was once again walking through the breezeway, and I noticed that some guy was across the street, just standing there, staring straight at me. When I locked eyes with him, he started to rush towards the school, but I didn't know what he was doing until the last second, when he started to shove his hands in between the bars to grab me. He had the same red eyes as it happened in the dream, which shook me to my core. When the police showed up to the school, it turned out that the guy was a convicted pedophile, who was also high on a ton of different drugs, thus making his eyes completely bloodshot red. But in that moment, I wondered, was my dream the reason that happened? Or was the dream simply a warning? To this day, that event still scares me to my core. It was in autumn, about 9 or 10 p.m., I believe, after it had gotten dark already. I was having a sleepover with some friends, and we decided we wanted some snacks, so two of us set out for the dollar store. To do this, we took quiet neighborhood streets that were mostly old people already in bed. As we passed across a road, we saw this creature. In my memory, it was sort of humanoid, but had long, skinny arms and legs and a large head. It was at the end of the street, about 150 yards away, so I don't have exact features. The most striking thing that which allowed us to see it was that it was very large. It was crouched down in front of a house, but even then it was about as tall as their roof, so I'd say about 13 to 15 feet. I wanted to investigate, but my friend, probably afraid of dying, really just wanted to get on going to the store. Unfortunately, the store was closed when we got there, so we had to turn back, and when we passed that road again, whatever that thing was had vanished, further convincing us that it was something anomalous. I got a weird story for you, Goose. It's somewhat supernatural, although I'm unsure if it was a ghost or something else. This was a few years back. I was 12 at the time. I was in Publix with my mom and my friend and her grandmother shopping for groceries. I was alone in one aisle, facing the deli, when suddenly this big, blinding blue ball of light flew down the aisle in front of me. I felt the wind from the speed it was going knock me back a bit, and gave me whiplash. As it passed by, in my peripheral vision, I saw the reflection of it on the containers near me. When I looked around trying to find it after it happened, I saw nothing, and nobody else acted like they saw it. This is the most unexplainable thing I've ever experienced, and if anyone has any ideas, please let me know. Sounds like ball lightning. You might be the only human being that actually must have made contact with ball lightning, because that's just what it sounds like to me. Late to the party, but here's mine. Didn't really happen to me, but I was involved, so I'll count it. My sister and grandma were sharing a bed together in our house. I was a baby still, and that night I was sleeping in between them on the bed. It was around midnight or after that They both woke up in the dark, and they looked over and saw me falling off the bed. In panic, they both looked at each other and went to grab me before I could fall. Unfortunately, they didn't get to me on time, and fell, and they both waited for a thud and my crying to start. But nothing happened. No thud, no crying. In confusion, they both got up to look and found nothing on the floor, and I was on the bed. They both swear they saw a little body fall off the bed that night. So when I was a little kid, my mom had just put me down for a nap and was about to leave the room when something physically put her hand on her and said, "You get that kid out of the crib right now." There were men working on the roof that day, but the second after my mom got me out of the crib, a bundle of shingles fell down from the ceiling and into my crib. Well, I've got a few. I remember this one time I was at my friend's, let's call her A's, birthday party. In total, there were 4 of us. At some point around 1 to 2 a.m., we were watching horror movies in the living room. Suddenly, one of the girls, let's call her N, wanted to go pee, so we paused the movie for her to go. She had just taken a few steps to the nearest bathroom. It was legit right there next to the couch, but she noticed the light inside was on. When she asked and knocked, no one was there. No response. She tried opening the door, and it was locked from the other side. This felt strange, so we went to A's parents' room to check if it was one of them or her sister. Both her parents were chilling there, and they told us that her sister had gone out. At this point, we were genuinely confused, and really had to go to the bathroom, so she was just getting a bit desperate, even making a few jokes at the restroom door like, "Hey, Mr. Serial Killer, please let me pee." But again, no one replied. Now everyone was getting scared. Then we realized the balcony. See, the balcony in the kitchen had direct view to the bathroom window, so someone could go out there and find out who the hell was inside. Since every other girl in there was a huge chicken, I had to be the one to go to the balcony. I went, looked through the window, and to my surprise, the lights weren't on as we had previously seen, and no one was inside. As soon as I got back in, the door unlocked, and she finally could go to the bathroom. It was quite the creepy experience. Now for the big TM stuff. I don't know what that means. I've had weird things happen in my house. One time, I was trying to sleep at like 4 a.m. I was lying on my side, and out of nowhere, I hear a feminine voice sort of breathe/whisper in my ear. I was paralyzed by fear, and I couldn't move. After about 10 to 20 minutes of paralysis and silence, I felt it coming back and quickly covered my ears with a blanket. This didn't stop the sound though. I still heard the same fucking thing again. I eventually fell asleep somehow. Another time, I was with my boyfriend and we were about to go to sleep, so I asked him to help me take my jacket off. While he was helping me, I felt a hand slowly scratch my back with awfully coarse nails. I told my boyfriend, "Hey, that hurts," because I thought it'd be him. He was confused and asked me what the hell I was talking about. I told him, "You scratched my back with your nails." He responded, "I didn't even get my hands close to your back. I had them all the way up to your shoulders." We looked to see if I had marks on my back, and yep, it was red. It was difficult sleeping that night. Anywho, that's it for now. When I was a kid, about 9 or 10, I was sleeping in my room. Suddenly, I woke up in the middle of the night, seeing one of my blankets half folded, floating at the end of my bed. I was so fucking scared, so shocked, that my first reaction was to cover myself with the other blanket and close my eyes, forcing myself to go to sleep, repeating in my mind, "Ghosts don't exist, ghosts don't exist, ghosts don't exist, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep." I eventually got back to sleep and woke up the other day, and everything seemed perfectly fine. The blanket that I saw floating the other night was on my bed. My parents didn't mention walking inside my room in the middle of the night or whatsoever. I didn't see who or what was holding my blanket in the middle of the night, but I assumed that it was some sort of figure/person. I'm 18 now, and the only rational explanation I can find is that I experienced some sort of sleep paralysis, but it still didn't make any sense. because I actually don't have sleep paralysis and I was able to move, i.e. grab my other blanket to cover my head. Whatever the hell happened that night still haunts me until this day. I'm pretty sure I wasn't hallucinating. Here's a scary story that happened to me while I was in high school. It was very late at night. I was in my kitchen with my dog, Clover, making some chocolate chip cookies. I noticed that the flour had gone bad. There were bugs in it, and I freaked out because I don't like bugs. I was putting the cookie ingredients away when I heard the garage door, the big one that opens for the car, opening. My mom was out that night, so I thought that maybe she came back in. I was waiting for her to come inside, but it didn't seem like she was going to. Suddenly, I saw the door that leads to the garage swing open and then slowly pull back, as though whoever was coming in decided not to, but didn't shut the door all the way. Clover saw this and ran over to the door excitingly, wanting to give kisses to who she thought my mom. I decided to call my mom and ask her if she came home, and she said she didn't. So here I was, this 15-year-old girl, home alone with her older brother, he was in his room the entire time, and dog, freaking out. I even went over to the door and saw that the garage was shut and the main light was on, but it was completely empty. There weren't any signs that someone broke in either, like things missing or broken items. I called my mom again, crying, and I told her what happened. She tried her best to calm me down, but I don't think she believed me. I even told my brother what happened, and all he did was call me crazy and that the door didn't open by itself. But I know I'm not crazy, because Clover would have no reason to go over to the door and bark so happily if she didn't think someone would be there on the other side. To this day, I have no idea if it was a ghost or a robber or something. The house we lived in was near a forest park that was rumored to be haunted, and I have had some other experiences there that you could say were paranormal. I'm just glad I don't live at home anymore. My dad had told me this story of when I was 6 years old. We were living in an apartment building and some random stranger quietly walked through our front door and stealthily crept up the stairway, only to be greeted by a room full of people, some of which were my dad and my two grown-ass brothers. Seemingly trying to save face, the man nervously inquired, hey, is Tom here? We didn't know anyone named Tom, so naturally my dad responded with, no, sorry, you got the wrong house. The man gave what looked like a fake smile and apologized before quickly stumbling back down the stairs. When he turned his back to make the exit, however, my dad noticed a large kitchen knife jutting out from the back pocket. Needless to say, we had made sure our doors were always locked from that point on. I remember in middle school, I was walking to my bus stop alone, doing this dumb little game where I had tried to take one step per sidewalk square. I heard a young girl's, I'd estimate 5 or so from the sound, voice ask me, "What are you doing?" Like a foot away from me, and I respond, just being weird, without thinking. I wound up pausing, and I looked around my empty street before sprinting the rest of the way to the bus. It freaked me out. My high school is the oldest public high school in California, Anaheim High School. And, as with all extremely old buildings, it is haunted, but no room is more haunted than the theater. I'm a theater kid, a techie to be more accurate, and during a performance of The King and I, my headset was getting some weird interference. It sounded like a baby crying, and I asked on the headset if anyone else heard that noise, and they say no, which was strange since we were on the same frequency. I didn't think much of it and continued my duties as usual. At intermission, one of the kids in the show told me about the strange man sitting on the second floor. Our theater has 2 floors, but we only use the first floor when we put on shows. I asked him to describe the man he saw, and what he told me I will never forget. He said the man was wearing black, he was tall, and he had no head. I was in disbelief, so I went to check it out. I went up to the second floor to ask my friend who was working the spotlights if she had seen anyone up there, and she said no. So I went down to the front of the balcony and looked around. That's when I saw him, a teenager, in all black, with no head. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed with fear. My friend saw me and got me out of my shock. However, the story doesn't end there. The same night, during Act 2, I heard a blood-curdling scream from my headset, and this time I wasn't the only one. It was my friend in the spotlight booth. She told us, panicked, that there was somebody hanging from the rafters. I looked up, and there she was, a pale girl hanging from the ceiling. I rushed to go tell a teacher. When I returned, she's gone. When I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I did some research. It turns out, one night, a 17-year-old boy was crushed under a lowering stage mechanism and was decapitated in like 1998, 2 days later. His girlfriend hangs herself in the theater after school on a Friday, and it isn't found until Monday. I'm still haunted by the events of that night. I was actually so curious about this story that I went ahead and looked up Anaheim High School and tried to find out if this was true or not, whether this story happened. And I found a lot of interesting things about Anaheim High School. There's allegedly hundreds of different ghost sightings from that high school alone, but the one particular story about a decapitation and the followed up suicide, I couldn't find anything on that, but I don't doubt it. There seems to be a lot of horrible shit that happens in that high school. But yeah, it's super haunted. Maybe someday I'll talk about it. When I was really young, I'd say around toddler age, I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing something in the dark sitting in my chair. At first, I thought that it's just some blankets. But then once my eyes got used to the darkness, I could see that it was someone. My first thought was that it must have been my brother or my dad. But the longer I looked at this person, I realized that I didn't recognize their face. It was an old man, and after staring at him for a while, he gave me a warm smile before just disappearing. When I woke up the next day, I immediately looked at my chair, realizing that there wasn't anything on it. No blankets, and no old man. I would just say that it was just a weird dream or sleep paralysis. But here's the thing. After I told my mom about this a few months ago, she told me that before we moved into that house, it was owned by an old man who ended up dying there. Apparently, I used to run up to her and talk to her about an old man a lot. Like, "Mom, the old man in the hallway. I'm gonna play with the old man." That kind of stuff. My mom also said that sometimes she would see an old man out of the corner of her eye, either just standing there or sometimes even watching over me while I played. We sadly don't live there anymore. But if we did, I swear I would try so hard to get in contact with that man. I'll tell you a scary story that I can't quite remember if it was a dream or not. I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. We went to a Chinese restaurant by the beach for a family gathering that I think was to celebrate my great-grandma's birthday or something. I remember what it looked like too. It was a house on stilts overlooking the sea. This story happened at night, maybe past 8 p.m., while my parents and grandparents were eating dinner and talking amongst themselves. My older cousins and I decided to play tag. I thought I was being real clever by running to the back of the building and hiding in the dark beside the back door stairs. There I sat, all alone and far away from the others while I waited for someone to find me. That's when I suddenly heard a shifting beside me. I looked up to the fence and saw a hand sticking out from behind it. It wasn't a monster or anything. It just seemed like to be a regular human's hand. It waved around like it was being playful before trying to beckon me over. Of course, being a kid, I was terrified. I went around the building past a cousin and ran up to the dining area where I hid with my grandma. She asked me why I was so upset. I just couldn't explain it to her. The two seekers came back with the rest of my cousins. They still had the mindset of being in the game. They tugged at me saying that I'd been caught and it was too late to keep hiding. They also asked me if I was up for another round. When it was obvious I was upset, they tried to comfort me. But again, I couldn't tell them what happened, or they'd tease me and say that I imagined it all. I didn't ever want to go out of the building alone, so I spent the rest of the night tucked beside my grandma. Talking about this experience with them is a mixed bag. Some don't remember that night at all. Some do. They remember the restaurant, even its name, and that it was torn down years ago. Some remember the game, and that afterwards I clinged to my grandmother, but they forget the details beyond us playing it. Maybe it was a dream generated out of a memory. I don't know. The scariest part is how plausible it was. Maybe there was a creep waving at me, and who knows just what they were intending. Okay, so this actually happened to me. Me and my mom just got back home from McDonald's and we went to our rooms. I was still a bit tired since it was early in the morning, so I fell asleep. Now, usually my dreams are weird and like under-budget movies with bad plots, but this one was different. It was nothing, just nothing, but pitch blackness and a recorder being played in the background. Suddenly, I heard the faint sound of a woman laughing. I thought it was probably my mom in her room, and then it happened. Out of nowhere, I felt a pressure on the bed, and the cover slowly moving up. It was like something was trying to get in bed with me. So I quickly got up, and I saw nothing. I ran to my mom's room since I thought I heard her laughing, but she was asleep. When I eventually told my mom about it, she was terrified. She said something similar happened to her. She said it happened when her boyfriend at the time left for work. She was laying in her bed when she felt something get in her bed and wrap its arms around her. What scared her the most was that there was no room for another person in the bed. After all that happened, strange things happened around the house. Dead animals randomly started appearing. Guests claimed they'd see a figure in black in the kitchen. There was also knocking in the walls. So, yeah, that house was creepy and we left. End of story. Sorry this is so lengthy, but here we go. When I was around 4, my mom was starting nursing school, so she wasn't around as much as usual. Soon after she started, I had a dream where I was in a concrete box with my mom and grandma. My mom was getting ready to leave, so we were saying our goodbyes, and the only exit from the box was this doggy door that you needed to pay a dime to go through. So she left to go to school, but I wanted to say goodbye to her again after she had went through the door. So I said goodbye again and went back inside. Even though she had already left, I went back out to say goodbye again. I eventually ran out of dimes doing this, so I asked my grandma, who was sitting in a chair at the back of the concrete box, for more dimes. I ran out of those dimes too, and started panicking because I wanted to say goodbye to my mother again. I tried wedging my way through the door, but it didn't work. In response to my escape, my grandma said, "She's not coming back." Sorry for the messy writing, by the way. And yes, this did actually happen. Don't know if I should put this story here, but I'll probs forget about this whole video until it's too late, so here it is. When I was about 8 or so, I was sitting in the car on a road trip with my parents. I remember my mom was driving as my dad had too few many drinks before we left my cousin's house. It usually takes about 2 hours to get home, so when we left around 2 p.m., I wasn't worried about missing any of my TV shows that would be released that night. It was Wednesday, I think, not too certain. But as the time struck 4, I noticed we were still miles away from home. I asked my mom how long would it take for us to get home. She answered something weird like, "We've just left, silly." I was so confused, like as if I'd lost 2 hours of the day, but we were driving for those 2 hours, and my dad was still passed out. I was certain the clock said 2 when we left, but it could have been just my eyes, so I just ignored it. Until we pulled up to the driveway. It was 4:10 p.m. I literally didn't know what was happening. Like, I flipped. I questioned my mom till my bedtime that night. She didn't have a clue what was going on. A few days ago, I remembered it out of nowhere. So I decided to ask my mom if she remembered any of that. She seemed to be distant, I guess, when I was asking her these questions, but she kept saying she knew nothing. She said I could have been daydreaming or something, and I thought she could be right. I was young, I was full of creativity, but it was so vivid, Like, it had to be true. Dad was useless asking since he was far gone that night. I literally have no idea what happened. It's so confusing. I've never been able to get anything out of my parents either. They're just clueless when I bring it up, so I've never really had an explanation. I guess along with this, hopefully being part of Goose's video, I was hoping someone might be able to come up with a solution. I lost 2 hours and then gained it back in 10 minutes. I don't know if it's possible, but I was really scared when it was happening. It would be great if someone could give somewhat of an explanation. It would help me sleep better at night. Thanks. I don't know. I really have no idea. You just went through the Matrix, I guess. Sure. When I was younger, I think grade 4-ish, my classroom was in the basement in the school. There was always dumb rumors of things happening down there, like someone being murdered and other stuff that was blatantly false. Besides that, it was really eerie down there. The worst part being the bathroom. All around bad vibes from there. Now here's the scary part. I was up in the study hall because my dumb ass was never able to do the math work, and I really had to piss. So I head downstairs to the bathroom in the hallway that leads to it, and there was a dark cloud looking thing that just loomed there. Since I was already a paranoid kid, I ran back upstairs, but I swear on my eventual grave that I was fucking followed by that thing. There's no logical explanation I can give that would explain it, and I know for a fact that it wasn't imagined. So when I was young, I seemed to sometimes see and hear stuff that wasn't there. Now obviously in hindsight it was just a product of an autistic kid who had a very wild imagination. Outside of the simple seeing shadows move in the corner of my eyes and such, it wasn't anything too crazy, except for these two occurrences. First, a quick little thing from 3rd grade. I distinctly remember people in my class telling me that if I slept curled up or at an angle, the creatively titled boogeyman wouldn't be able to grab you because your feet weren't hanging off the bed. Now, of course, this was just kids being kids, but I still instinctively slept with my legs curled up because, hey, don't want to take any chances, you know? This went on for years until one day I goofed up and slept like a normal person, and as I laid there trying to sleep, I remember feeling someone grab both my feet, like full on grab. In an instant, I literally jumped out of bed, freaked the fuck out, but of course nobody was there. It was obviously something to do with me about to fall asleep or something. Maybe some sort of sleep paralysis, maybe? I don't know. As an atheist, I tend to just think it was my mind playing a trick on me. But I still sleep with my legs curled up after that. Second of all, when I was around 14, I remember laying in my bed trying to fall asleep. I remember rubbing my eyes before hearing someone shout my name in my ear. Naturally, I nearly screamed and looked around. Nothing. I went into the hallways. Nothing. I then asked my parents the next day if they had called me, to which they responded, no. I don't know what to believe here, because I don't think I was asleep. After all, if I was asleep, how did I rub my eyes? Unfortunately, I don't have anything super crazy scary, but to this day, they're still probably the scariest memories from my childhood. A bit of a simple one, really. About 2 years ago in October, my sister and I were dropping someone off home. It was about 9, but very dark. I was driving. They lived on a very built-up housing estate. We let them out outside of their house and made sure that they got to their front door. We drove down the road a little way and turned the car around. When I swung the car around, the headlights caught a solid black shadow moving very quickly and disappearing. It was about 6 foot tall and person-shaped. I was immediately filled with dread, and all of my hair stood on end. We said nothing to each other until we were off of the estate. When I said to her, "Did you see that too?" And she said, "Yes, it was something with bad energy." We puzzled over it, wondering if it was really just a person on a bike because it would move so fast, maybe of a shadow, that's something my headlights caught. But there was nothing for my headlights to catch, and if it was a person on a bike, we should have been able to see a reflection of metal, a face, something. but it was a black, solid void. It was some kind of bad entity, I'm convinced. Even now, thinking about it chills me. And sometimes, when I'm outside at night, going to or from the car, I feel the same bad energy. I never turn around. Just act normal and hope it goes on its way. I have a story. It's small, but that small moment really scared us. Something scary happened to me and a cousin when we were smaller. Me and a few family members lived in the same house at the time, aunt and uncle. As such, me and my cousin had a lot of gaming play time because we were dumb kids that had nothing else to do. One night, while everyone else was either watching TV or eating, me and my cousin went out to try his new GameCube with Sonic Heroes. No spooky setting here, all lights were on and we were playing Sonic Heroes as we sat on the floor. Suddenly, we hear a button press, then an error screen popped up. Immediately, we looked at the GameCube and the tray was open, barely catching the glimpse of the eject button being pressed down before springing back up. My cousin and I looked at each other and ran out the room scared. Luckily, all rooms were close to each other, so we took less than 10 seconds to scram out of there. A lot of creepy stuff happened in that house, even a scary case of toys functioning without batteries. I remember the location of that house because of it. I'm not sure if it's how it was before, but that one experience we both had, it really stuck. Back when I was in high school, me and a couple of my childhood friends decided to visit a local amusement park for a couple of days. It was your typical small park, boardwalk on a lake, some coasters, the whole shebang. On the second or third night, we decided to sneak out and walk into town. After about 15 minutes of ducking into ditches when we thought we saw a car coming, I got bored and decided to walk back to the campground. On my way back, I got an odd feeling and decided to look behind me, only to see two guys following. Initially, I thought it was nothing, but I grew concerned when I remembered that there was only one intersection on that road, and I definitely didn't see them when I crossed. Still hoping it was nothing, I decided to adjust my speed only for them to do the same. That's when it hit me. The intersection that I crossed had no houses, only some hedges and a small wall. It seemed a bit too contrived for my taste, so naturally, I booked it. I didn't stop running until I reached the campground. Once I arrived, I met with my friends who had taken a shortcut back. According to them, the guys who were tailing me were hiding behind the wall and started following me after I crossed the intersection. To this day, I dread thinking about what could have happened to me if I hadn't gone with my gut that night. Here's a scary story that I haven't thought about in a long time. I might make a story time vid on it one day. If I shared this before, then my bad. It just came to mind and I felt like sharing this. So all this took place in 2011. My mom, brother, and myself moved to Florida for the first time in years to get away from an abusive dad. It was a fresh way to start, so we were all fortunate enough to have my uncle and aunt take us all in until mom can find a house. Here's where stuff went down. One night, I woke up and wanted a drink, so I walked to the living room just to head to the kitchen, and at the corner of my eye, I saw a black figure standing right by the front door. To my surprise, I just thought nothing of it. Maybe I was just thinking nothing was there since the dark gives an illusion, like maybe it's a coat or something. I got my water and walking back to the front door, nothing was there. So that was that. Weeks later, around 4 a.m. or 5 a.m., my mom heard noises and saw that the front door was slightly open. She thought this was odd, but then thought of my uncle. My uncle leaves around that time to head to work, so he must have accidentally left it open as he left. So she shut the door and thought nothing of it. But the door thing happened every few weeks, and my uncle assured that it wasn't him. Of course, my uncle took precautions and made sure the door was closed every night, and make sure he closes the door, probably in case this was him leaving it open. Again, weeks later, my uncle took my cousins, brother, and I to Walmart. My uncle gets a phone call, and out of nowhere he yells at us that we had to go and left the cart behind. The rest of us being confused, we keep asking Uncle what was wrong until eventually he finally explained that Mom and Aunt were in trouble, that there was an intruder. So what happened was, while we were in Walmart, my mom and aunt were watching TV. My aunt noticed a man standing out of the screen door. This caused her to, of course, panic, so she grabbed my mom and ran to the neighbors for help. Not only did they phone the police, but they also called Uncle, which was why the rest of us had to leave Walmart. So the neighbors stayed with my cousins, brother, and I, while my aunt, mom, and uncle talked to the cops. They explained how it could relate to how the doors were open. Now, for the rest, I'm going to share what my mom, aunt, and uncle shared to me, since I didn't witness any of this. After all that, months passed, and there wasn't another weird incident that happened. Until one morning, around 3 a.m., my uncle felt sick and missed work. I won't lie, him being sick was a blessing in disguise. He heard noises at the front door, and without fear, he swung it open and saw a man standing there in fear. My uncle asked the man what he was doing, and the guy, for some reason, just confessed everything about the door. How he was the guy that was stalking through the backyard, how he knew my uncle and sister, my mom, and would step inside to watch her and us, my cousins, brother, and me, sleep. This enraged my uncle that he got into a fist fight with the man. Not only did we all hear the commotion, but so did all the neighbors. So by the time we all went outside, I shit you not, it was my uncle and some of the neighbors just stomping on this guy, while others called the cops. My uncle screams at my mom and aunt, "Keep the kids inside." So we were all freaked out, and eventually it clicked to all of us that the guy getting the shit kicked out of him is the same guy that stalked my mom and aunt that night. So later that day, we were all sent to my other aunt's home, my mom's uncle's sister, while my uncle, aunt, uncle's wife, and mom were at the police station. So finally, they came back and explained to us that everything will be okay. We all just had questions about the doors. How is it that the guy managed to get inside and others? During that whole explanation, I felt sick to my stomach because it finally clicked to me. On that night, I saw that black figure. A huge part of me believes that this was the man this whole time. Of course, I shared this info and my uncle was furious, but my mom and both aunts were understanding, saying that it wasn't my fault and that it was a mistake. Of course, chances are me seeing the black figure could have been a coincidence, or maybe it was him. To this day, the story is shared and it's usually told around parties, not every, by my mom, aunt, and uncle. What is strange is how, even though the man was in the house staring at us sleep, nothing was rearranged or stolen. The guy was just obviously a creep. When I was in 3rd grade, the school held a general assembly for the parents. I went home while my mom was preparing for the assembly. I was supposed to stay in the house, but since I'll be alone, both Dad and Grandpa have work whilst my brother was in the daycare, I eventually went back to school with her. After I arrived at the school and entered my classroom, I saw my classmates inside preparing for a game they called Spirit of the Glass. Our teacher, along with my mom, left us in the classroom as they were about to head towards the meeting, which leaves us students inside. I planned on not participating in the game, since I'm a coward, but they already placed my name on the sheet of paper. Thinking that the ghosts might curse me if I wouldn't have participated, I finally joined them and sat on the floor in front of the paper. As far as I can remember, the paper contains our names written on every side and corners. My classmate used her little pink plastic cup and placed it upside down on the middle of the sheet. We eventually started placing their index finger on the cup when it suddenly moves on its own. The force was strong enough that I can't even stop it from moving. I know that it wasn't them who moved the cup since we're little kids, and who the heck would have forcibly moved it? I was both scared and angry, thinking I should have warned them not to play it before as the class representative. I kept on saying to stop whoever's doing it as the cup lands on my classmate's name. What's worse is that her name is besides mine. After that, we all ran away from our classroom, leaving the cup and paper behind. We caused a disturbance around the campus and the teacher started scolding us, saying that we should return to our room. They all had blank faces, plastered as we sat silently. Even one touch within their skins made them cry. I started scolding them, as the class rep of course, and one of my classmates reported it to the teachers. In the end, the papers were thrown in the trash, along with the cup telling us that we should never do it again. My mom told me a few years ago that when I was just recently born, there was a shadow figure that she saw in her dreams. Apparently, it would leer over my crib, and one night she literally woke up screaming prayers. The last time she ever saw it was when she was getting ready to go to work. She saw the pitch black figure with red eyes, stiff in the snow. When she got in the car, it was gone. No footprints, nothing anywhere. She said she could always tell it was near when she smelled the scent of cigarette smoke. In 2018, I was cleaning out my basement near Christmas, and me and my mother found a picture of me from like 2006. The photo was, for the most part, normal, but upon closer inspection, there seemed to be a ghostly child in the photo. I made a post on 4chan's/X board and looked around in other places for an explanation about what the hell could have happened, but no one has an answer. Really creepy how it was the only one part of the picture too. I never got an answer, and it freaked the fuck out of my mom and aunt. Here's the photos, by the way, that he provided. That's spooky, but I'm pretty sure there's some explanation to it. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't seem like it's paranormal. It just seems like maybe some photo stuff was happening. Maybe it collected with another photo. I don't know. I remember one morning when I was really young, I was playing in the living room of my parents' old house by myself. I heard footsteps in the kitchen down the hall, but I didn't see anyone there, and I thought that my mother was upstairs at the time. "Mom?" I called out, thinking that she had somehow passed by me without my noticing. Then someone's head quickly peeked around the corner and ducked back into the kitchen, making my little heart skip a beat. It wasn't my mom's face. It didn't even look like a human face. It was pale and almost featureless, like an old cartoon's ghost. I don't remember everything after that. I just know I ran to my mom and told her what had happened. She tells me now that I didn't want to leave her side for the rest of the day. I even dropped my favorite toy while she was going through Walmart and didn't stop to pick it up. I was too scared to step away from my mom for even a second. Looking back now, I have to think that I somehow imagined this ghost lady, as I had come to call it, that popped out of me. Mainly because I don't know why a real ghost would appear to me as a cartoon-looking character. My sister lives in that old house now, and if I ever visit her, I still try to stay away from the room where I got scared. Even if it was just my imagination, that place just holds a bad energy for me now. Well, when I was a kid, around 7 to 8 years old or something, I was really into creepypastas and the all-known horror games, Amnesia, Outlast, Resident Evil, and, of course, Silent Hill. That's to say, I was especially a fan of the idea of the Slender Man. However, seeing, reading, and thinking about the stuff other people created was just not a hobby of mine, but of my cousin as well, who was at the time well around 16. So, one wintry night at around 7 p.m., we were sitting around in my room, main light turned on, talking about stuff we have seen and what we think about it. And, since I was just a kid, about the things I would see and or imagine at night. For example, while lying in bed, I always left my door open and had my desk lamp turned on until my parents would turn it off. For those things made me feel much safer. However, every time the lamp was on, it would create a dot of light in the room across the hallway, which was the bathroom. The light hit the wall just above and behind the door. With the way things were organized, it looked like a rather small slender man was hiding right behind the bathroom door, just a little bit of his head peeking just out to watch me. The first night I saw that, I was scared shitless and kept myself awake for hours until my dad headed off to go to the toilet, at which point I finally figured out that there was no danger whatsoever. Other times, the moonlight would reflect multiple times between the wall and my radiator until that light hit my closet. When I saw that, I would make it out to be ghosts trying to make contact with me. My helpful mind joked around that they were even talking to me, until I actually did hear voices in my head. After talking about that to my parents, they decided to put up some extra removable wall between the radiator and the wall, which of course would stop the whole act. The bathroom scene went on, though, as I never told them about that. So, that night, while already being on the topic fitting it, I thought to myself, well, hey, it would probably be cool to show him that. So I turned on the desk lamp and joked, yo, see? There's someone watching you. He was really surprised, maybe even shocked, and ran out of my room, right to the door to look behind it. Of course, there was nothing. After a time of seconds, I went out, walked right over to him, and wanted to explain the trick. As soon as I entered the hallway, though, the main light in my room started to turn off all by itself in a flick of a second, which was a rare thing, since that light always flickered for 3 seconds until it showed a steady light. But at first, I didn't heed it any mind, thinking that it was yet another trick in my head. As we both collected in the bathroom, staring behind that door, it hit us. He whispered to me, asking how I managed to turn off the light when I was already out of my room, since the only switch we had for that roof lamp was inside. I quickly replied, I don't know. Must have hit it by accident. Nervously, we flipped the light switch over and over for a few seconds until we realized that the bulb must have broken down. The both of us were no experts of changing bulbs, though, so we headed downstairs to ask my dad if he could do that for us. First, however, he wanted to check if the lamp really was dead, so he slowly went upstairs with us, flipped the switch himself, and voila! The light worked perfectly. Thinking back, our idea is that it was the electricity having a bit of a problem reaching the lamp. Scary for us were the coincidences that we were just talking about stuff to creep us out, and that the light switch was, without us checking it, on the turned off side when my dad made sure that the bulb was broken. I've had small creepy things happen to me ever since I was little. Even after moving houses, small creepy things happen. Sorry if they're not that scary. When I was little, I used to have this small, thick, yellow plastic chair. I forgot how, but the chair ended up getting a hole in it. When my sister was little, she put coins in it, and they were really hard to get out, so we let them in there. When you moved or shake the chair, it would make a distinct noise as the coins moved inside. I remember hearing that distinct noise in the middle of the night, as if someone was shaking the chair. The chair was kept in our living room, by the way. I never questioned it, because this happened when I was so little, so I always shrugged it off as my parents playing with the chair, so I ended up forgetting about it as I grew up. It wasn't until my sister once brought up how she remembers hearing the chair shake at night, and that's when I got this cold, sickening feeling, realizing I heard it too, and how stupid the idea was that my parents were playing with it. We asked our parents, but my mom doesn't have a good memory, and my dad is a heavy sleeper, so they don't recall hearing that. Another thing that happened in my old house was that my dad used to watch this ghost hunting show. Me being just a little kid, I was oddly creeped out about it, yet interested in what they did. With my little young head of mine, I thought it would be a good idea to contact ghosts like they would in the show. I grabbed a candle, who my father had already lit on earlier, and 2 toys of mine. One of them was a plastic banana and the other a plastic strawberry. I went into the kitchen, which at the time was dark. I set the candle in the middle and the 2 toys beside each other. I said out loud, "If anyone is here, then move my favorite toy." I said this with my eyes closed while thinking about the plastic strawberry. When I opened my eyes, I saw the strawberry right in front of me. Surprisingly, I wasn't scared, but rather excited to see that it worked, yet scared that my parents would find out. My mom didn't like the type of stuff at all, so I kept it to myself. Other stuff happened in the house, but I want to move on to the creepy things that happened to me in my current house. One day, my sister had to wash the dishes. The drying rack was quite compacted, so she didn't want to risk putting the last clean dish, which was a glass cup, in there in case of it falling. She ended up getting a napkin to put under the cup so she could place the cup in the counter to not wet it. She placed it relatively close to the middle. Fast forward to dawn, I went to the restroom to get my hairbrush when I heard glass break from the kitchen. I instantly thought someone in my family had broken something, so I went to the kitchen to see what mess they had made. To my surprise, I saw my mom sitting down at the dining table looking down at the broken glass. I asked what happened, and she said that she didn't know. She was confused, just as much as I was. She asked my sister if she left the cup near the edge of the counter, and she said no. To back up her claim, the napkin was right where my sister had left it. The glass had not moved from that place until somehow it moved and fell down to the floor. To make things even weirder, the broken glass cup wasn't that near to the counter. It was relatively far from it, as if someone pushed it forcibly to land far from the counter. My last story for now, which is the scariest one for me. My friend had come over to my house, and her mom wanted to borrow a charger from us. I went to go grab my sister's extra charger from her room as my friends followed. The charger was plugged in behind this small drawer my sister had beside her bed. On top of the drawer was a small statue of the Virgin Mary. It was facing forward, by the way. As I went in to search behind the drawer to get the charger, in the corner of my eyes I see something move. I thought it was my friend fiddling around, but to my surprise, my friend was next to the door in complete shock. I asked her what, and she replied, "Didn't you see?" I told her no, and she points at the statue. It turned on its own. The statue was indeed now facing me, to the right. Some people might think it was an angel, or even the Virgin Mary herself, looking over me. But regardless of that, I was pretty scared. If you read this, thank you. Love your content, by the way. Hey, thanks a lot. I love you too. This story is by PSI Blast. Here in Chicago, we have a cemetery named Bachelor's Grove. It's positioned deep in the woods and well known for its ghost sightings and hauntings, and has its fair share of dedicated ghost hunters that set up cameras and educate people on the history of the property. The cemetery itself is tiny and only has around 200 graves. In order to get there, you need to walk down a long gravel road that is blocked off to cars, forcing you to walk on foot deeper into the woods. It is completely surrounded by old, rusty wire fencing, and in the back of a cemetery there is a shallow, swampy pond. Many of the graves belong to children, and some have been decayed so badly that there's no telling who is buried there. You have to take special care in not stepping on any graves. In 2012, the Travel Channel show Ghost Adventures sent their crew to investigate the cemetery, which goes to show how infamous it is. Anyways, my mom was extremely adventurous and loved the show, so she took us. This was in the bright daylight, mind you, since everyone was terrified to go in the dark. After we walked down the long gravel road and entered the cemetery, the only people there were a group of ghost hunters who apparently dedicated tons of time to capturing the ghosts at Bachelor's Grove, and the same crew Ghost Adventures met on their exploration. The cemetery and swamp were scary on their own, but there were also several trails leading off deeper into the woods near the cemetery. Apparently, at one point, there was a family that lived in these woods, and there were sightings of the ghostly house that once stood there, and we wanted to see if we could see anything poking out from the brush. After walking for a bit, we came to a fork. To the left, we went deeper into the forest, and to the right, we went across a small stream and up a hill. Being an adventurous kid, I immediately opted to jump over the stream and up the hill, but when I got to the top, shivers ran up my spine. Something seemed different. It was almost as if the forest was quieter, and something about the air seemed menacing. I immediately stopped. In front of me was a gigantic clearing in the forest, and the trees surrounding it seemed straight, unnaturally straight, like someone had physically bent them all upright. I could see logs in the clearings make an almost circular formation, and although I was tempted to make my way towards them, I couldn't bring myself to come out of the brush. I didn't feel safe stepping into the clearing. My mother and my brother were close behind me, and they instinctively stopped too. There was silence before my mom uttered, "We should go. I don't think we should be here. We need to go." There was no hesitation. I immediately turned around and bounded down the hill again. I didn't know why I was afraid, but I was unsettled. I grew up around the forest. I loved the outdoors, but something instinctively grounded me to the spot. It didn't let me go into that clearing. Later that night when I went home, I mentioned this to my friend. She told me that trees straight up are a sign of dark or demonic energy, and that something was not right. Upon researching more on Bachelor's Grove, I discovered that there was, in fact, Satan worshipping and desecrating performed here, and there was likely not a better place to do it than that unnaturally artificial-looking clearing. I don't know what kind of demonic energy I may have been subject to that day if I stepped foot into that clearing, but I'm glad I didn't. I'm just glad we all followed our gut feelings. This next story is by Mr. Shiwu. So this is a story I've been wanting to share for a while. One night, back when I was in 3rd grade, I randomly woke up in the middle of the night, and for the life of me, I can't remember why. For some reason, something compelled me to check under my bed, and so I leaned over the edge and peeked under. Again, I don't really remember why I did this. It was over a decade ago, and I was super tired, but what I saw under my bed still remains vividly in my mind. I was greeted by a face with empty eye sockets, a heavily bandaged forehead, and a jaw that was hanging open wider than any normal person would be able to. The skin was super wrinkled and colored a pale gray, though I'm not sure if that was just from the dark lighting it or if it was actually gray skin. After seeing this, I immediately jolted back into bed and buried my face into my pillow, forcing myself back to sleep out of sheer fear. I try to be generally skeptical about things, and I don't really believe in the paranormal, even though I find it fascinating. But this experience has legitimately traumatized me to the point that, for years, I refused to check that particular side of the bed, especially at night. I like to think that this was just an incredibly vivid and realistic nightmare, or possibly a case of fucked up pareidolia, but neither of those answers feel truly satisfying. There was nothing under my bed at the time, so that makes pareidolia hard to justify, and if it really was just a dream, it is hands down the single most immersive dream I have ever had. For me to comfortably write it off as just a dream. If you guys have any other ideas, please share them. I'd love to hear your takes on this. By the way, Goose, if you see this, you're a real trooper, man. I know this month has been real rough for you, so major props for keeping up the good work as always. Thank you. That's nice of you. It's fine. I've been okay. I've dealt with worse. Don't worry, bro. Here's a short one by Anetter. Really short, but this event pops into my head every now and then. When I was about 12-ish, I was lying in bed, not being able to go to sleep, when I felt my cat jump onto my bed and nestle right next to my legs. At first I didn't pay mind to it, until I heard my cat meowing from outside my window, wanting to be let in. And whatever was sitting next to me had disappeared. Another really short one by Right Behind You. Fairly short one here. One night, my sister and I were talking in the kitchen next to the window. While we were talking, I saw something pass the window and into the driveway. I asked my sister if she saw it, and she said yes, so we went to look outside. We frequently have stray cats come into our driveway. However, we didn't find anything. It couldn't have been a cat or a human, as the speed was almost inhuman. However, the silhouette looked almost human. I'm pretty sure this is one of the few reasons for why we got motion sensor lights. We still don't know what that thing was. This next story is by Lurker. So to preface this story, I have to start with the fact that I have lived in a haunted house and have had several positive and safe paranormal encounters. Ever since I was little, I've always been fascinated with true crime, horror, and the occult. I say this because I have no solid paranormal explanation for what I'm going to lay out. For about the last 5 years, I have been experiencing touches. They're not from any living being around me that I can determine. Sometimes they come in forms of taps, pinches, or strokes, and others in the same fashion as a cat would crawl around the bed in my lap. They can be scary at times, but overall they seem to be harmless, even friendly sometimes. If it were just the cat-like qualities, I would have chalked it up to just our old cat paying me a visit from limbo. However, one time, in the early morning hours, 4 to 5 a.m., I was awoken from some of these touches trailing down my leg. My immediate response was, "Great, there's some sort of bug on me." But when I went to kick my leg, I realized that I was in a state of sleep paralysis for the first time. After a few seconds, I felt the touch on my calf turn into what felt like 2 large hands holding my ankles down. This feeling only stayed for a few moments before disappearing, and I woke up enough to move my legs farther up onto my bed. Eventually, I fell back asleep, but throughout the whole incident, I'd been laying on my stomach with my head covered by a blanket. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't have seen who or what touched me. I asked family members about it later that morning, but it didn't ring a bell with any of them. The only explanation I have right now is that it was a sleep-induced hallucination, so if anyone has any other ideas, let me know. This next one is by Great Print. Short, but the fact that I can still vividly remember this creeps me out. I was young, around 10 years old. It was one of the only nights where my little sister didn't sleep in my room. I was okay having her sleep with me because I was scared of sleeping alone in the dark, but I insisted she sleeps in her own room so she could sleep on her own. It was somewhere past midnight when I started feeling like there was something heavy on me. I couldn't move from where I was in bed, and it felt like I was stuck there for hours. As such, I struggled. I couldn't move, and when I tried to scream, I just couldn't. I wanted to open my eyes to see what it was, but I just couldn't. It was then when I heard my little sister call out my name. That was when I could open my eyes and moved. I sat up, looked at her, but my sister wasn't there. I swear I heard her. Her voice was pretty indistinguishable. I couldn't believe it, but when I got up and went to her room, which was pretty far from my own, I found her sleeping soundly. It still freaks me out to this day. This next one is by Kyle Lockwood. One time when I was younger, I was staying up a little bit past the usual bedtime playing on my DS or something, until my door randomly opened wide. And when I say open, I mean handle got pulled down, and I remember hearing it. I expected my parents to tell me off for staying up so late, but my doorway was seemingly empty. Nothing looked to be out there except like small little lights to me, and at the time they just looked like the glint of light in someone's eyes, which did not help ease my mind. No windows were open, and it wasn't my sister or my parents, who were all asleep by this time. I did call out to say to my sister to stop messing with me, but there was no response. It actually took me a while to get the guts to close my door. My light switch is also right next to it, so of course I was in the pitch black during this entire thing. To this day, I don't like sleeping with my door open. This story is by Kestero. During my first year of college, I lived in a pretty old dorm that was set to be demolished in the next year. I lived on the top floor of the building, the 9th. One October night, Some of my floor mates and I were sitting in the common area / lobby of the 9th floor, and one friend pulls out a Ouija board. There was still light outside, around 5 o'clock on a weekday, so there really wasn't an appropriate atmosphere for any kind of seance. Because of this, a few people were messing with the board while the rest of us were doing our own thing. One superstitious girl saw that they were using it wrong, something about the board not being level. One of the guys using it said, "Whatever, it's not like ghosts are real anyways." At that moment, the elevator door opened, and it was empty. Everyone saw and dispersed without a word. Weeb Squid has a few stories to tell us. Also, you're incredibly brave for having that profile pic. I have a few, but they're not actually my stories, even though I did see proof that it did happen. So, I'll tell the least interesting one that actually happened to me, a ghostly experience. I was still in secondary school, high school basically, and even I remember the day it happened, Valentine's Day. An extra important detail to note, the school had another 4-floor building in the middle with 3 classrooms on each, only on one side. The only way up and down is the stairs. We had finished our final class of the day early, so our teacher let us leave the class to kill time until the bell rung. I always stayed with my teacher because I really never hung out with anyone from my class. My teacher was grading things outside while also supervising, and I was on my phone. The bell rings, everyone starts to leave, the classrooms quickly get empty. As I almost say bye to my teacher, we both see a girl on the 3rd floor walking towards a classroom and entering it. She was smiling, her backpack was rainbow colored, and her uniform was a tad different. Yes, we used uniforms, one for normal day and one for PE. Since no one had to remain inside school, obviously, my teacher made her way towards her to tell her that no one's supposed to stay inside the school. I followed my teacher as well, upstairs towards the 3rd floor classroom, and nothing. They're all empty. Dead silence. No one was there. This freaked my teacher out a lot, while I was just there kind of surprised. Just to make sure, we first checked the lower classrooms and the 4th floor classrooms. Dead silent too. After that, she quickly walks downstairs with me following behind and left the school with the spooks. She never wanted to give class in any of those classrooms ever again. And if she did, she'd ask a classmate to wait for her and quickly exit. The following day, my teacher and I tell the spooky story to classmates and other teachers. We suddenly learned that a long time ago, a tragedy happened on that floor. On Valentine's Day, nonetheless. Eggs D Prince has a shorty. Really short one. Our family's a huge cat family. We got a ton of cats, and some of them have died over the years. We've had some graves outside of our house, which were just stone squares with writing on them. One day, when I was really young, I pulled one of them open and saw something I can't describe properly. It was like a snake, but it was all black and bigger near the top with no features, like some kind of tentacle. It was waving around really fast, and I quickly put the grave back down and ran back inside. I tried explaining it to my mom, and she said it was just a cat's soul. We have a garden over the grave now, so I can't even go back. I'm still questioning what the fuck that was to this day. This next one is by Scart. One time I was alone in my bed. It was something like 3 in the morning, and I had just put my phone down and went to sleep. My eyes were closed for a few minutes before I heard a woman's voice whisper in my ear, "What happened?" I was silently shocked and a little unnerved, but I knew it wasn't my mom since she was asleep in the other room. And what happened isn't exactly an ideal way to start a conversation at 3 a.m. Still have no idea what happened. Was it a hallucination? Probably, but it was still freaky. Here's Aaron with a real quickie. Here's a short story. When I was around 10 years old, I was playing with my sister on my Xbox 360. We were playing Kinect games. You know, that little gimmick that would track your body movements and translate it in the game. Well, one night we were playing a Connect game that required us to do a scan to figure out the amount of people in the room, and when it showed the scan on the TV, we saw one other person that was supposedly in the room with us. The Connect sensor indicated that there was someone else in the room, next to our bed. It even drew an outline of the person. It was short and sitting on the floor. It even showed it moving its body around. I assume it was a type of glitch, but that day we were both scared and immediately turned off the Xbox. Cinnamon Toothpaste has their own story. In my school, the oldest kids always went on a 3-day school trip as a treat for finishing their exams into secondary school. When it was my year, we went to some place in Wales, surrounded by water. Standard stuff for a kid's trip. It was like a youth hostel with lots of bunks and around 4 kids in each room on bunks. Pretty normal setup, but every time I opened the room door, I heard someone whispering pretty indistinguishable sentences at me. Garbled speech. Now it could just be the door creaking, but it sounds like a barely audible whisper, not the kind of shrill squeak a door makes. It freaked me out so much, and what was worse, it was only that door. No other doors did that, and I was convinced the room was haunted. After the 3 days were done, while I was heading back, I swear the door waft said goodbye in the same whispery tone. I still wonder what that was, and I don't think the other girls heard it. I still can't explain why that happened. Mary has a very unique last name that I'm not even going to bother pronouncing, but they also have a pretty cool story. My horror story is honestly an odd one from when I was about 10 or so. This was around the time my mom stayed as a stay-at-home mom, and my dad would work really late shift as his clients were rich people flipping beach houses, so I'd rarely see him until 12 p.m. if I'm lucky enough. But one day, our bathroom light went out, and my mom didn't know how to replace it, and my dad, being like miles away, couldn't just drop from work and drive all the way home for one small light bulb. So the whole day, we had to use the bathroom with no lights, especially at night, which for me wasn't a big issue. We had a tiny window which left in some light, and I'd keep the door open to get light from the hallways. But during a small night trip to the bathroom, after drinking a shat ton of Gatorade while watching Cartoon Network, I just sat there and I heard a voice say, "Hello." I didn't respond because, what the fuck? Shit shocked me, but when I turned around to the window, whoever that was there just responded, "Boo," at me and laughed as I ran off. Pants around my waist, screaming bloody murder. I just pulled them up and told my mom I heard a man's voice in our bathroom, with her only response being, "It's probably just your padrino, kiddo. Go back to your room." Here's the thing. My padrino wasn't home. Neither was our other closer neighbor. Both of them were also working dads, one being a mechanic and the other being a business guy. None of them have access to our backyard, and neither of them were home at the time. I don't know who was in my backyard that night, but they were certainly peeking through our bathroom window. I couldn't even see their face, so I couldn't even tell if it was a stranger or not. Nothing else happened that night, but I feared using the bathroom in the dark after that. Let's go ahead and head on over to the Reddit to see if there are any other stories. This one was made by Skolstis, who actually made us really cool fan art the other day. So, shout out to them. Before this, I like to note that I am actually a skeptic, and I'm not sure if I believe in ghosts, so I'm seriously not trying to make this up. This is a short story from when I was younger, but I'm fairly positive I know what I saw. I still remember it clear as day. When I was about at least 5, so quite a while ago, my room, as it is now, used to belong to my sister. She always believed it was haunted because I think a lot of weird stuff happened, and it was always weirdly cold. Colder than any other room in the house. I was deathly afraid of ghosts at this age. I think everyone was. One night, we had gotten home from some sort of social event. I don't know what it was. Maybe a party. And I decided to sit down in the hall of my house for some reason. It was so long ago that my memory is fairly blurred, but I think I wanted to draw in the hall. Keep in mind, this was at maybe 2200 at night, so what, 11 p.m.? I'm not sure what provoked me to go into my sister's room. Maybe it was to get a pen or something, but I twisted the handle and gently opened the door slightly until I was abruptly stopped by a skinny, pallid, white hand that stretched around the door, almost as if it was scratching the door, its claws digging into the surface. I let out a huge scream, because who wouldn't, and collapsed backwards onto the hall floor. I don't remember what happened afterwards. I think I actually checked again, but there was no one behind that door. And it couldn't have been anyone in my family, because they were either downstairs or in the bathroom. As I said, my memory is blurred. Not to mention that nobody in my family has skeletal hands. Over 10 years later, and my sister's room is my own room now. It remains chilling, genuinely freezing for no reason, and it definitely has some sort of aura that I can only describe as off. Kind of weird. This one, shit, oh my god. Hey, yeah, sorry about that. That was my door. That was my doorbell. The delivery guy who's gonna deliver my food is here, and I got my food now. So, hi. How's everyone doing? It's my first meal. I haven't eaten anything in like hours. It tastes great though. It's a sandwich from Subway. Meatball marinara. I'm probably the only person who fucking loves this. But I do. I'm not a pedophile, so please don't. Oh my god, I feel so much better. I can see again. My head doesn't hurt anymore. Okay. Let's continue with the spookies. Where was I? Frater Smithers has a story for us called The Light Over the Bridge. When I was a teen, about 10 years ago, I used to visit my mom's family in the countryside regularly. To get there, we had to cross a bridge about 500 meters over a river. Most of the time, there was nothing happening around the river, and I know that no boats used to cross it other than small canoes. The water was too close to the bridge for anything larger to be able to pass, and it had the most beautiful view during sunsets. But then there was this one time when my mom, who was driving the car, my aunt sitting in the back, and myself sitting next to my mom were crossing the bridge in the middle of the night to get back home. We were the only ones there and everything was normal, until suddenly a very strong white light started flashing in a way similar to when we blink our eyes very fast. The light flashed for what appeared to be a minute or so, but for some reason, no one reacted to it until it had stopped. I asked my aunt if it was her taking pictures on her phone, as back then she used to do that a lot, but she denied. I didn't do anything, and my mom couldn't do anything either, since she was concentrating on driving. None of us saw anything outside the car, and granted it was very dark outside, but we knew it was impossible that there'd be something on the road or on the river capable of emitting that light, and the light didn't seem to come from any specific direction either. It was as if the whole car was being covered by it from all sides. After that day, we mentioned what happened to some people, especially to my family in the countryside, but they either didn't believe it or disregarded it to just a prank. But there's no way that it could have just been a prank, since that would require a lot of work and would be something extremely dangerous to do to anyone crossing a bridge at night. To this day, I still have no idea of what was that light and where did it come from. But regardless, that was just the second most scarring thing that ever happened to me on the road, as the most scarring one was the time we almost hit a cow that was crossing the road in the middle of the night. Now that actually gave me nightmares for weeks. I have no idea, but they have a story at least. When I was a small child, I would often find it difficult to get to sleep, so I'd just be laying there waiting. The first time this happened, I was in a bunk bed with my older brother. I was about 3/4 and I was laying in my bed. My brother was already asleep by then when I opened my eyes and saw what looked to be a person crouching beside the bed, and it looked like it had some chest hair and weird eyes like they were concentric rings in all sorts of colors like an archery target, and it had long head hair. I looked at it for a few seconds, blinked, and it was gone. It can't have been sleep paralysis, because directly after it disappeared, I got up and looked down the hallway for it, but it was nowhere. The second time this happened, it was the exact same creature, except this time I was about 6 or 7 and in a different bedroom, still with my brother who was asleep and not in a bunk bed. My bed had a perfect view of the door when I was laying in it. This time I was staring at the door when it peeped its head around for a few seconds and then it disappeared. Again, I got up looking for the thing, but it just might have been my mom, but it was gone. I heard only a faint, indistinguishable muttering both times. Cluckbuckle has a story called My First and Only Ghost Encounter. I'd just like to start by saying that I don't consider myself a believer in ghosts. Up until a certain point, I never had the sort of paranormal experiences others seem to have, so I could never relate, at least not until a few years ago. For context, I spent a lot of nights as a teenager at my dad's one-story rental home. The layout was pretty odd. My room and my sister's room were right next to each other, with the only ground floor bathroom immediately next to my room. Outside the bathroom, you'd find the living room attached to the kitchen by a small hallway. This is all to say that you could basically see the whole house just standing in the doorway of my room. So one late night, my dad's driving me home from a party around 1 a.m. It was a school night, and I was frankly exhausted, so when I did actually get home, I just conked out in bed without changing or brushing my teeth. I slept for a while, but I remember waking up at 4 a.m. or so to take a leak. I didn't go to the bathroom immediately, though. After I woke up, I decided to change into my PJs, get an outfit together for school the next day, and send a couple of texts to my girlfriend at the same time. All in all, it must have taken me at least 20 minutes to do all of this. Needless to say, I was just very much awake by this point. So after doing my nightly routine, I finally left my room to use the bathroom immediately next to my bedroom. Before I could, I came to see a tall, completely white man in a suit just standing in the middle of our living room. He had his back to me, so I couldn't see his face, but I distinctly remember he was bald and had very prominent ears. I kind of just stood there confused and scared. For whatever reason, in the moment, my first instinct was to just blurt out, "Dad?" Without turning around, this figure walked into the kitchen in the most stilted, awkward way possible before disappearing. Imagine walking as if you had no knees. That's how this thing moved. Obviously, I didn't piss that night. To reiterate, I never really believed in ghosts or paranormal entities or what have you. At first, I was of the belief that it was just my stepbrother, who also tended to stay up late, just lurking around the living room for some reason. The only issue is my stepbrother wasn't there that night. Okay, so this one is from Ephemeral Burrito, and it seems to be more of a suggestion than anything else. However, I couldn't find any more details than what this story already says, and the video, I can't seem to find it anywhere, so I'm just going to read what they said because it is kind of creepy. Throughout this week, I had been wondering if there was anything I was aware of that might seem as a topic of interest. For whatever reason, I have never seen any horror-style channels speak about this specific video or the situation behind it, which, to be honest, after so many years, I'm not entirely sure what was happening there either. When I was a little boy in middle school, YouTube videos were not available to be watched on our phones, as phones with data was an entirely new concept that was barely being worked on. If you wanted to show your friends a video, you had to download it, and if you wanted to share it with them, then you had to send it from phone to phone through Bluetooth or infrared sharing or something like that. One of those days, early during school hours, a friend of mine called me and other friends to the back of the classroom. And in his phone, he had a video that he downloaded from YouTube. The title of the video was, yes, was, La Muerte de un Emo, or The Death of an Emo. The original title was in Spanish. Now, disclaimer, you cannot find this video on YouTube anymore for obvious reasons. However, you can find it in shady-ass websites. I do not want to be responsible for giving out a link that leads to someone getting a virus, but the video is out there. The video begins with a black and white portrait of a guy as well as a quote with some music in the background. For the life of me, I cannot remember what the quote said, and I have no goddamn idea who the guy in the portrait is. Right after this, the following video begins. The video portrays a number of guys, I want to say young adults, all male, surrounding a young woman, and for whatever reason, pushing her and beating her. The video does not portray any extreme gore or anything like that, but the image can be very uncomfortable to watch, as you can tell the woman is in pain, and who knows how long this has been going on for, especially towards the end. To my recollection, the reason why you can't really make out what is happening or what the condition of the woman is because the video was so low quality, yet at the end, it is very clear what happened. You can see at the end of the video, and just when the woman is laying on the floor, exhausted from God knows how long the beatings and bullying, a guy comes into frame, what I recall to be a big rock, proceeded to, well, that. It has been over a decade since the first time I watched that video, and I've never been able to completely forget it. A few months ago, it came back to me once again, and I decided to do some digging. However, the only lead I ever found was that it was a woman being stoned to death due to religion or homophobia in an Eastern country. I have to say that, as this was found on a random website, I do not find it reliable, to say the least. Anyways, I hope I'm not breaking any rules. It's just a topic that I've never been able to forget or know exactly what's happening. Maybe Goose or one of you knows something about it too. Good night. Probably not. I've seen a lot of horrible shit in my past, but I don't really recall anything like that particularly. And I'll be honest with you, man, there is a lot of videos like that. As weird as it sounds for me to say, that video doesn't sound all that special when you really compare it to other gory videos and death videos out there. Though if we could ever find it, that would be a special thing in itself. But I really, like the original writer said, I do not recommend going out there and trying to look for that sort of video, because you'll probably stumble upon dozens of gore videos before you actually find that video. So unless you have a strong, fortified mind and you're not really, affected by this sort of stuff, then I still even wouldn't recommend it, because like he said, the website could potentially affect your computer. So it's not worth it. Leafy Boy has a really cool creepypasta. The Arm of the Charred Man. When I was young, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Man, what is it with you guys and seeing horrible shit when you're 5 or 6? I was getting ready for school. I went to the bathroom to brush my teeth and stared at the mirror to make sure I got every tooth cleaned. When I finished, an arm grasped my shoulder. It was blood red to the wrist and charred, a fine black color to the elbow with no upper arm. I turned to my shoulder and there was nothing. There's 3 reasons why this proves the existence of ghosts to me. The first is because I couldn't even make an apple in my head if I tried. It turned out someone died here from a fire. But the most strange one comes from my older sister. She saw a red humanoid in her dream after I saw the arm. The arm of the charred man. Apocalypse Moose was also cursed at the age of 6 or 7, so here's their story. I don't think I have much in the way of childhood trauma as far as just spooky stuff goes, but there was one thing. It was when I was 6 or 7, so I may misremember a few things. But anyway, me, my family, and my grandpa all went out on one evening to eat somewhere. I think it was Ponderosa's Steakhouse. When we got back to his house to drop him off at around 10 p.m., I saw something that really weirded me out to this day. My grandpa was a farmer, so he was mostly surrounded by fields. And across the field, in front of his house, were a few rural houses. Well, when my family and I were walking back to our car, I looked out across those fields in one of the yards, and I saw something. It looked like a large white cloth that was swaying around, like something was underneath it. Basically a bedsheet ghost, but I figured calling it that would detract the terror. I asked my family what that was over there across the field. Fortunately, they did actually see it, so I wasn't just hallucinating. However, they just told me it was either a blanket on a clothesline or some flag waving in the wind. Being a naive little kid, I just took their answer and we went home. Something about it has really been bugging me out all these years. I've looked over at that yard during the daytime, and we've even driven by it in the daytime. There was never a flagpole or clothesline there. Taking a break from the supernatural, let's take a look at Jarvis the dentist's suggestion. So back in high school, I didn't really have a lot of friends. Honestly, my social life was pretty poor until I went to college. In either my junior or sophomore year, I met a girl who I'll refer to as Christine. Christine was one of those kids who would be way too into talking about self-harm and other disturbing concepts. I don't know how I got to talking to her, but she would hang out with me from time to time during lunch. One day, she started flirting with me while we were talking. She wasn't really my type, but I was pretty lonely and didn't immediately mind. A few days later, when we were talking, she just abruptly mentioned how she had spent time in juvenile detention center for trying to kill her mother. I asked her multiple times if she was joking, but she said she was serious, all while sporting this stupid grin, expressing a sort of pride in it. I didn't fully believe her at the time, and I still suspect she was just lying, but this was my cue to stop talking with her despite her continued advances. Not too long after she moved away, I was talking with a friend of mine who knew her separately. She explained how Christine had apparently pressured her previous boyfriend into attempting suicide. Thankfully, he was unsuccessful, and he was trying to keep doing it after he broke up with her. Thinking back on why she was so interested in me, it made no sense. We didn't like any of the same things. We only met at lunch, and the only thing she really knew about me was I was prone to depression. Knowing what I know now, I think she wanted to get me to kill myself. As for why, I can't tell you, other than she was a psychopath. This story actually hits a little hard for me because I did have an ex-girlfriend back in high school who wasn't necessarily like this, but similar to that sense. We talk about self-harm, how much she hates herself, how much other people don't like her very much. And when you're a teenager, your feelings are very volatile. They're pretty much out there. They're very wild. And I'm sure some of you, and if not a good handful of you watching these, you guys are teenagers, so you won't notice it now. But in about 15 years, when, you know how people make those jokes of like, oh, life is just not as bright as it used to be when I was a kid, you know, it's not necessarily because things get more depressing, although they kind of do with taxes and everything like that. It's mostly because you're just so much more energetic when you're younger, and you get to express those feelings of yours so much more. But that girl that I knew, or should I say my ex, was so very toxic in the way she talked, because she would always talk about suicide, and not in the sense that it should be taken lightly. You know, every time somebody talks about how they want to kill themselves, it should be taken as seriously as possible. But when I was a teenager and I needed to break up from her because I recognized these horrible patterns, these psycho freak patterns, that she wanted to harm herself, that she wanted to drag me into that sort of lifestyle, and that she was obsessed over me. Every time I would talk to her, she would just always try to get me to stay with her no matter what, and she would always try and find me no matter where I went. And so I had to break it off, and I told her, I'm gonna break up with you. We're just not working out. And I remember she was so sad, and she actually said, if you do this, I'm gonna kill myself. And I said, whatever, I don't care. And guess what? She did not do that. I know it's very cruel to hear that, and I shouldn't have said something like that to her. But I was not going to allow someone to control me or to lock me in to something I don't want to do or want to be a part of. If she was going to do it, then she was going to do it without me, because I was not going to let her manipulate me in that way. So I left, and like I said, she didn't do anything. Years later, she did email me, and she contacted me again. She apologized for all that stuff, and apparently she sought help and all that good junk. But man, this story just really hits with me. Something about white teens, man. They're fucked up. The time I almost got shot by Hunter. By Hildre? I don't know. Okay, so first some context. I live in Norway, and at least here, the moose hunt goes on all the way till Christmas. Now, I live right by a friend in the middle of the woods, and since the nights in Norway are pitch black, it's hard to see anything when I'm walking home from a visit. Once I was walking home after the usual late night visit, but as I was feeling my way across the rugged dirt road, all of a sudden I heard a loud bang and a loud crack across my head. I ducked down into the snow because I was told to do so if I hear shots in the night by my mom. My area has a big amount of illegal hunters who go during the night. My heart skipped 5 beats and I loudly screamed, "What the fuck?" And I hear a, "Sorry," as the person seems to run into the woods. It isn't really a ghost story or anything like that, but it scared the crap out of me. I could not go outside in the dark for a long while after that. This one is from Robo Rebu, Red Asphalt. When I took driver's ed in school, it was a requirement to watch all the uncut Red Asphalt films. Red Asphalt is an educational film series by California Highway Patrol. It described car crashes in graphic detail. They also showed living and non-living bodies at the scenes of crashes. One that still sticks with me is in the Red Asphalt 5 at 6:27, where they zoomed in on a contorted body thrown from a car, eyes and mouths still open. It was the least bloody body in the film, but I think that's what made it worse for me, looking almost alive. It led to bad car anxiety for me. Even today, every time I drive, I remember the bodies. This story, I mean, I think it's something we can all relate to as Americans, and I'm not sure if it's the same for other countries out in the world. I'm sure you guys have your own version of, like, scaring teenagers to not do stupid shit with cars and whatever. The most popular nowadays is with texting. But I remember when I was a kid, we saw some similar shit, and we had, I believe, the sheriff from our town actually tell us all about, like, driving safety and showed us a bunch of horrible, I mean, really horrible images and videos of, like, dead bodies. These were really, really, really graphic. And it's funny because I remember when we were maybe around, sophomores, we heard from the juniors or maybe the seniors, you know, people who were about to get their licenses, that they were watching this because, you know, obviously the sheriff was showing them this. So we knew since we were sophomores and probably since we were freshmen that we were going to watch this someday. But the most fucked up thing that I think that sheriff did, truly fucked up, was not only did he show us those really graphic images of dead people in cars and all these situations, but he showed one of our dead classmates. No fucking joke, he showed one of our dead classmates. Because this classmate, after winning a football game sometime in October, I want to say maybe November, he had a terrible car accident. And it was because he was drunk alongside with his friends, and they all pretty much crashed right in front of the high school. I think they were celebrating in the high school and drove out into the parkway and just died like 2 blocks away. It was really not that far. And now when I say he showed a picture of it, it wasn't like the mangled body or anything, but he showed just like when he was alive. And it fucked us up because this was someone we all knew, and he was a really popular kid. He was like one of the jocks, but he wasn't a dick. He was like a really nice dude. And this dude, this sheriff, had the gall to show us one of our classmates that we actually loved and said, "What a shame, what a shame. A really young man might have made something out of his future." And we even heard like some of his friends, his close friends, like cry immediately. Oh, it was so bad. It was so bad. Oh, and also after we were done, we saw the cheesy, like a cheesy play of like dead bodies. It's dumb. They always do that stuff. It's shit.